Welcome to Poker Fraud Alert Radio. I'm your host, Todd Dandruff Wittelis. This is being brought to you live and recorded live on May 5th, 2025 at 1:14 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. So this is going to be a pretty informal show. I'm not going to do an official intro or anything. We're just going to kind of wing it. We do not have a call-in number because Skype has gone down, and Skype was the interface between the show and the telephone. So until I get that replaced, which hopefully will be soon, there is no call number, but there is a text number, as always, 775-372-8355. That is the number to text me if you would like to talk to me. You can also go into the chat room on PokerFraudAlert.com if you have a forum account in good standing, and you can go in there and chat with whomever else is in there. Probably not many people at this time. It is 1:15 in the morning. But maybe, maybe someone will be in the chat room. If not, you can just type and I will hopefully see it and respond to you. But better to text me. 775-372-8355 is the number to text me. I will try to read your texts on the air and respond. Been meaning to do the show for a little while now. I took a trip. I went to Arizona for over a week. Had it not been for the trip, I probably would have done this show sooner. But I went, I had to prepare for the trip, then after I got back I had some stuff to do. So I'm squeezing this when I can. And keep in mind, this might be a part 1, part 2 situation, even just live. So I'm just going to cover stuff that I think of or that I've been meaning to cover. And then anything else that I want to talk about I may be doing in coming days. And, of course, this will all be in the archive, so if you can't listen in the middle of the night, don't worry about it. You can find it. So, as I said, no agenda, nothing like that. We're going to just dive right in. So, the first topic I want to talk about is something that people keep texting me about. Ever since this broke on the news, people have been texting me. This story appeared on CBS News Chicago, and people have been wanting my take on the situation. It's another sports bettor doesn't get paid story. And before you say, oh, come on, how many of these can you do? You're going to cover it. You're going to say the casino was right. You're going to say the bettor was shady and was trying to get away with something. And you don't hold a grudge against the bettor, but you can't really take up for him in his favor because he knew the risk when he was trying to do something shady. I bet you're expecting the segment to go like that, as several of these have that we've covered on the show, especially recently. But I would not make this the main story we're doing tonight, or at least not the first story. I don't know if it'll be main. But I would not make that the first story we're doing tonight if that were the story, because we've done too many of these lately. This one's a bit different, and I'm going to just jump right in. I'm going to play the CBS News Chicago report about this 20-year-old named Thomas McPeek, who thought he won $800,000 at 2 different Caesars sportsbooks, not in Nevada, in Iowa and Indiana, and then they wouldn't pay him. And it's a pretty complex story, actually, and a Poker Fraud Alert member named Sidewinder, who also listens to radio, found something that, to my knowledge, nobody else found. I actually almost found it, for reasons I'll explain when we get to it, but he found something very interesting by pausing the video and zooming in. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. I will let CBS News do the talking and explain this, and then I will pause it and give a lot of different commentary. I'm also going to play you bits of other shows, not poker shows, but sports betting shows, where they give their takes on it, and I will tell you whether I agree or disagree. So let's just get into it right here. Let's listen to what CBS News has to say about this situation. This was broadcast on April 25th, 2025.
Tonight, a fascinating tale of a 20-something suburban man who won $800,000 in sports bets. He traveled as far as Iowa to place his bets. Then when it came time to cash in, the casino said, no way. Our Suzanne Lemonnier is listening to this would-be winner and gives us an inside look at the life of a professional gambler.
These are the winners. I'm holding, theoretically, or what should be $800,000 in my hand.
We meet 24-year-old Thomas McPeek in the home he shares with his parents.
Okay, so he's holding this stack of tickets that he got from the sports book, and he's in a home that he, quote, shares with his parents. Now, to be fair, he's only 24 years old, but that right away already raised some questions in my mind. Like, if this guy is such a successful sports bettor and he's 24, why is he still living with his parents? When I was 24, I was not living with my parents, but I was not able to place the type of bets that this gentleman was placing and you're going to hear about. So I'm not quite understanding why he's living there unless his parents are involved with bankrolling this thing he's doing. But that's not really that important here. Just jumped out at me at the beginning, and let's listen to the rest of this.
An area in their house is a shrine to their favorite teams.
You researched, you've read every single one of these books.
Yeah, this was a calculated attack, I guess you could say, where I thought I had an edge.
This refers to stacks and stacks of sports bets placed last year. Complicated wagers on football called parlays, where several events all have to happen to win. First stop, Horseshoe Casino in Hammond.
Now, before we go on, first of all, a parlay is not complicated. It's very simple. You just place a bunch of bets at once on one ticket that all have to win for the ticket to win. So if you place a 6-team parlay and 5 of the 6 win, then your ticket loses, even though you went 5 and 1. But if all of the selections on your ticket win, then you win anywhere from a few times to many, many times the amount you bet, depending upon the odds of each bet and how many different legs of the parlay, how many different events you're betting on are on your ticket. People like parlays because you can put up a little money to win a lot. So if you don't have, then you can try parlays. It's kind of like a lottery in some ways because the very long odds parlays, you're not going to hit very often or ever, but people like them. And occasionally someone gets lucky and strikes lightning in a bottle. And you can't do that by just betting on straight games. You know, if you bet just a point spread or if you just bet a total on a single game, then you're only going to win basically around what you bet. Sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less, but you're not going to win exponentially more like you will with a parlay. But it's not complicated. So he placed a lot of parlays. They're showing that one of them was the Horseshoe in Iowa. Let's go on.
In August.
You went in with $30,000.
Roughly over the course of 1 week-ish.
And your wins were $350,000?
$350,000.
The next stop, the Isle Casino in Bettendorf, Iowa in September. Both locations happen to be owned by Caesars.
I take about $20,000. I sat at the kiosk for 4 hours just punching in my bets. Bet after bet after bet after bet after bet.
McPeek looks for wagers where he believes the odds are in his favor.
If you want to take a look at that notebook.
McPeek does extensive research, some of it laid out here in his handwriting. Over time, he and other professional gamblers believe they can gain an edge, but it's hardly a slam dunk.
Okay, let me stop right here. I will give him credit for admitting that he is a professional sports bettor. And I will give him credit for later in this interview. This interview is only 5 minutes. This segment is only 5 minutes, so it's not going to be that long. We're about 2 minutes through. But I will give him credit for not only admitting that he's a professional, but also that he was trying to skirt the rules, trying to hide his identity, and trying to do things the casino did not want him to do. That's a refreshing change from the other stories I've covered here, like this one, where they come on and say, well, it was my dream. It was my dream to win this type of money, and I thought it was going to pay for my daughter's college, and now I don't know how I'll pay for my daughter's college when she turns 18 in the year 2040. Like seriously, that was the last one. The dude had like a 3-year-old daughter, and he was talking about her college. And he was acting like this was just, he won something very innocently, and the casino won't pay him. And there's a lot more to the story, of course. So here, the guy is saying, oh, yeah, I'm breaking the rules. Oh, yeah, I'm a professional. Yeah, I'm trying to beat the casinos. He even called it attacking it. Attacking the casinos. So, okay, he's being honest about that. I'll give him credit there. Let's go on.
It's not like I can just snap my fingers and just make the bets win. They still have to win.
Most of the tickets did not win.
In my hands right now, these are all losers.
But a few of the tickets were winners. Big time.
And I won $350,000.
But they won't pay it to you.
No, they will not.
McPeek tells us Caesars voided the tickets when he tried to get his cash in October. He says he was referred to the house rules.
Do you think that's fair?
Of course not.
A similar story when he returned to the Iowa casino this January to collect $450,000.
So one of these, the one in Illinois, was for $350,000 roughly. That was in October 2024. And in January 2025, he went to the Iowa casino, also owned by Caesars, and tried to get a $450,000 win paid. And they wouldn't pay him there either.
For these winning tickets, this time he was given a printed sheet highlighting structuring or anti-money laundering rules and repeat wagering policies.
Okay, so let me stop right here. I always like when things are shown on the screen, even if they're brief, to where I can stop it, I can pause the video and read it. Because that's where you get the truth. That's where you separate the sensationalism from whatever the real situation is. And in these news reports, it's often a mixture of both. So they did show and highlighted on the screen, not shown for very long, but of course, since I have a pause button, I can make it as long as I want, the main two reasons that they would not pay him. This was at the Iowa casino. One of them read structuring/AML standards. AML stands for anti-money laundering. And this is the rule of structuring they claim that he violated. The structuring of wagers to circumvent federal currency transaction reporting thresholds is strictly prohibited. Additionally, all wagers are subject to the federal anti-money laundering reporting requirements, including the filing of currency transaction reports and suspicious activity reports. Now, let me tell you what that means if you don't already know. There is a requirement where any amount of cash over $10,000, meaning $10,001 and above, that if that changes hands between you and a business, then it needs to be reported through what's known as a CTR, or currency transaction report. That's basically saying this money changed hands and here's why. And it's in place and has been in place for a very long time, for many decades, in order to prevent money laundering, especially through casinos. Any business, especially a casino or bank, that does not file these can get in big trouble. So they told him that among the rules they said he broke as to why they can't pay him, one of them was structuring. Now, it is true, people will sometimes structure through casinos. So, for example, let's say you win $30,000 in blackjack, and you say, oh, crap, I don't want to cash out $30,000 because they're going to make me fill out a CTR to get $30,000 cash. And you'd be right. That's what they do. So if you don't want the IRS seeing that you're cashing out $30,000 through this CTR, you might say, well, why don't I just only cash in some of these chips? So I'll do $9K today, $9K tomorrow, $9K the next day, and $3K the final day. Then we never pass $10,000, and I get my $30,000 out. Perfect. Well, not perfect, because that is against the law. That's a crime called structuring. It's a federal crime, and that's where you are knowingly circumventing the $10,000 plus reporting requirement through the CTR. Banks and casinos are warned to look for structuring and to report it when they see it, or to, at the very minimum, stop the person from engaging in it, to where if someone tries to today and 9 the next day, they say, no, we're not giving you any further money till you fill out a CTR. That's what they're supposed to do. So that's what structuring is. And they are claiming that he was structuring. Now, how could he be structuring if he hadn't been paid anything? He went to go collect his $450K and they wouldn't give him any money. So how could he be structuring? Well, they claimed that the way he was betting was structuring, which we'll get to shortly. But I will tell you, it's absolute bullshit. He was not structuring. This was a dumb excuse, and they're just looking for any way to deny paying him. I will get to my theories as to why also a little bit later. But the structuring, while it was used as an excuse not to pay him, he was not structuring. Not only don't I think he was structuring, I know he wasn't structuring, and I've never met him, and I've never spoken to him. But I know he wasn't structuring because I know the story here, and this is not structuring. But we'll get to that. The second thing was a little bit more applicable to what was going on with him.
Laundering rules and repeat wagering policy.
So repeat wagering. This is what it says. Repeat wagers. Caesars Sportsbook reserves the right to investigate repetitive wagers made from a single account or syndicate accounts with the same outcome, meaning placing the same bet over and over. Caesars Sportsbook reserves the right to void and or withhold payment of such wagers pending regulatory approval. Now that's just basically saying those are our rules. There's nothing illegal about betting the same thing over and over. They're just saying our rules forbid placing the same bet over and over. Now, why might that be? Well, what they're trying to do is control the amount bet by any individual, or as they say, syndicate. So this way they don't take a bath if sharp bettors either know something or just did better analysis than they did and want to get a lot of money down on the game. So your limits are not very high at sportsbooks if you just walk in. If they don't know you and you just walk into a sportsbook, unless it's a very high-profile event like the Super Bowl, typically they're not going to accept a very large wager. It's not uncommon for a book, even in a very large casino, to say, sorry, we won't give you more than $1,000 on it. We won't give you more than $2,000 on it. That's very common for them to tell someone they don't know. Now, if they know you are a big sports betting fish, then they might give you very high limits. If they know you're a sharp bettor, they might refuse your wagers or give you extremely low limits. They may say you're limited to $100, or they might say we're not taking your action at all. But even as an unknown, you're not going to have very high limits because they know that there's runners who will place bets for professional sports bettors with the professional's money. So just because they don't know somebody doesn't mean that that person isn't representing someone who's sharp. So basically, if they don't know you, most sportsbooks will not give you a very large wager. So their terms are saying here, if we catch that's what you're doing, if either you're betting over and over the same or you're sending your people in to bet the same thing over and over, then we're not going to pay it and we're going to refer it to gaming. And we'll figure it out from there. So this is a way to dissuade people from sending in repeated bettors to bet on the same side to circumvent limits. So they're claiming he did that too, except they're not saying he sent in anybody to do it. They're saying he did it himself. And so how did he place all these consecutive bets here? Well, he will explain.
You want to fly under the radar?
I want to fly under the radar.
McPeek, like many so-called advantage players, go out of their way to remain anonymous. McPeek places a lot of smaller bets at a kiosk instead of one big one with a clerk at the counter to avoid his bets being rejected.
Okay, so that's good that he admits that. So he's not only admitting that he's betting through the kiosk, which is a newer thing at sportsbooks these days. It started, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago, something around there, depending on which book it was. But you can now bet at kiosks without having to go up to the desk and place the bet with an agent. Of course, you can also do it online, but you can't really circumvent anything online. That is, if you're in a state where you can do online betting. But I'm saying that the kiosk is a way to circumvent limits because the kiosk does not know who you are, nor does it attempt to find out who you are. You can put a card into the kiosk to get credit for the bet, as far as like players' points or whatever, but you don't have to. You don't have to identify yourself to the kiosk. You can just walk up, feed the cash in, place a bet, get your ticket printed, and walk away. So the kiosk, unlike a human, cannot tell if it's the same person placing the same bets over and over and over again. As far as the kiosk knows, it's 300 people all in line happening to bet the same way. They don't know. The kiosk doesn't know. It's just a machine, and it does not attempt to figure this out. He admits that's what he did. He admits that he didn't go to the counter because the counter would not have taken the bets he wanted to make. He could not place one large bet at the counter for something he wanted to bet on for big money. He knew the only way to get that bet through was to go to the kiosk and feed in the same bet over and over and over again in small increments, like $300 each. And that was going to be the way that he would get around their limits. He's not denying this. He's admitting it. He's admitting he was doing this to circumvent the rules. Let's go on.
Listen to the lengths he'll go to.
I'll switch up to the disguise, sunglasses. I'll hide my hair in my hat. I'll put it up in a bun.
Horseshoe and Hammond banned McPeek and avoided his wagers. That's in contrast to FanDuel and Blue Chip Casino in Michigan City.
Okay, so I guess I got this a little bit wrong. He's actually in Indiana and Iowa, not Illinois, but close enough. I'm from the West. What do you want from me? I'm not even going to go back and edit this. So, yes, Indiana and Iowa. So they're saying he was already banned from Horseshoe Hammond. And he's going to reveal he was banned from other places as well. And he admits that in addition to just placing bets over and over at the kiosks in order to circumvent the betting limits, that he also will wear disguises. So this way, anyone who's watching him who works there won't see him standing at the same kiosk for hours entering all this stuff in. He'll probably leave and come back with a bit of a different look. He has long hair, so he claims he'll put his hair up under his hat or in a bun, or he'll wear sunglasses, he'll change his clothes, whatever it is, so it looks like different people if you're not watching too closely. So he's really going out of his way to get these repeated bets into the kiosks and get around the sportsbook's limits. And he does not make any excuses for it. He does not pretend that he was doing something else. He's very openly saying, yes, I know their rules, I know their limits, I'm trying to get around them, too bad, that's what I do.
Which also banned McPeek after a big win. But Blue Chip paid him first.
So in Michigan City, Indiana, he got paid $100-something thousand and then banned for doing the same thing. It's not a Caesars casino. It's called Blue Chip Casino in Michigan City, Indiana. So that's an interesting one. That one was willing to pay him and just said, get out, you can't come back. But Caesars will not.
They paid me a check of $127,000. They got beat. I won the bets.
McPeek took his gripes to state gambling regulators in both Indiana and Iowa. Neither state sided with him.
What would this $800,000 payday mean for you?
It's an insane amount of money.
So he took this case to 3 experts with 3 distinct points of view.
Now, before we get to the experts, I hate that question. I despise that question from the media. What are you going to do with the money? People asked me that shit when I won my bracelet in 2005, which was for decent money. It was for $347,000. But I was a high-stakes player anyway, so it wasn't just normal money to me. That was great. That was excellent money to have won. But I wasn't going to go do something with it. It just went into my overall bankroll for poker and life. And that's the way professional gamblers view it. You don't go up to other people who make good money and say, what are you going to do with the money? It's different if you win like the lottery for $600 million. Yeah, then it's a fair question. But $800,000, what are you going to do with $800,000? Well, first of all, the guy's 24 years old. So even if he never did anything with the money except try to live on it, that would not carry him through life, $800K, when he's 24. So what is this? What are you going to do with the money? So he gave a decent answer like, well, that's just an insane amount of money. I wouldn't say it's insane, but he's just basically saying, yeah, it's a lot of money. He's not even trying to say what he's going to do with it, because the truth is that goes back into his gambling bankroll. That's the real answer. But let's listen to the so-called experts discuss this. There's 2 idiots and 1 smart person here. Let's see if we can figure out which is which.
Mike Lawton is a retired gaming regulator in Nevada.
There's probably some details and some circumstances that we're not privy to.
Scott Morrow retired after a career at Las Vegas casinos and now teaches gaming at UNLV.
He went around, tried to circumvent the system, circumvent the house rules, and actually drive across state lines to circumvent it. So, I mean, I have a tough time finding sympathy for his case.
I've never seen a situation.
This is the third one here. The first 2 were crap. Okay, I wouldn't even have you guess. I'm sure you can figure it out already. These first 2, quote, experts were people who were actually formerly in the gaming industry. Of course, their loyalties lie with the gaming industry, and they're trying to find ways to make him look like the bad guy. The second one saying, oh, he drove across state lines to do it. Who gives a shit? He wasn't running drugs. He was gambling. He was driving to different casinos and placing bets. Oh, he's circumventing the rules. Okay, well, then they can ban him. And they did ban him. But that's not what we're discussing here. Nobody is discussing whether or not the casinos should ban him. We're discussing whether they should pay him. If they want to ban him, fine. If someone tries to circumvent a casino's internal rules and then the casino doesn't like that, they can ban him. But there's the legal question of whether he should be paid. And these 2 didn't get it right. There's a legal and moral question. And just saying, well, he's violating the casino's rules, You can't just say that's a reason not to pay somebody, because violating the rules does not necessarily mean cheating. Cheating, I agree, people should not be paid. But, quote, violating the rules, I mean, the casino rules say you can't count cards in blackjack, but if you get caught, you do get paid. You can get banned, but you'll get paid before you get banned. So anyway, those were two idiotic takes, but let's listen to this third one from an author of a gaming book. You'll hear something a lot more intelligent.
Situation like this before.
Eli Foystill literally wrote the book, multiple actually, on betting. He sides with McPeek, based on the timing of when Caesars voided the bets.
If Caesars had decided before the first game was played to void all the wagers, that would be fair. That would be saying you've broken the rules, and when they saw that they didn't win, when they waited to see if he'd win before they voided him, that's where the problem was. The clear answer.
Yeah, right there. Correct. 100% correct. If they voided his bets before these games went, then they would be completely in the right. They can say, look, we have these limits for a reason, and you got around them. So, no, we're not taking your bets. Here's your money back. Get the fuck out. You're banned, and these bets don't count. We're not taking your money. We're refunding you, but the result of these bets is not going to matter because we're voiding them all. I'd be completely fine with that if the casinos did this before these games went off. But for them to wait for a result for high dollar bets like he had there, because he bet a whole bunch of $300 bets in a row that he fed in there for hours and hours and hours to be tens of thousands of dollars worth of bets, and then on 2 different occasions he won big, and then they wouldn't pay him. That could be a complete free roll. And there's 2 ways this free roll could have occurred on the part of the casino. Way number 1 is just they intentionally wait until the guy wins to deny him, where they say, well, fuck him, we see what he's doing, but as soon as he wins, we won't pay him, but as long as he loses, we'll let him keep doing it. That's the intentional way. But there's also the unintentional free roll, which also is not good. The unintentional free roll occurs when a casino will look into a big win someone had and then try to figure out what happened. But when someone loses, they don't bother to look because it's not to their benefit to look. So, for example, let's say he was losing for a while. Let's say he lost a bunch of times in a row, which might have happened before this, by the way. So let's say he lost several times in a row 5 figures. They're not going to do a big investigation. How did this person lose 5 figures? Or, I wonder if all these bets in a row were really someone trying to game our system. Like, maybe, but they're not going to put much effort into it. They're not going to be very inquisitive when they're making money. When people are feeding cash into those kiosks and keep losing, they're not going to say, why are these people losing so much? They'll just be happy they're winning. As I said, occasionally, maybe if they see something really odd in the betting patterns, they'll notice it, win or lose. But I'm just saying that there's much more of an incentive to investigate when there's a big payout you have to do to the customer. So this guy shows up. He's young. He shows up with a ticket that, or a bunch of tickets, all in the same bets, all in the same events, bet the exact same way, that add up to $450,000. And they go, what the fuck? What is this here? How do you have so many $300 tickets all betting the same thing? What the hell happened here? And it doesn't take them very long to figure that out. So that becomes an unintentional free roll, where they only get inquisitive when someone's a big winner. So that naturally will make it where someone will keep losing and the casino won't bother to look into what's going on. And they'll only look into what's going on when the person wins, which makes it that once the person wins, they don't get paid. And that's what happened here. I don't know if it's intentional or unintentional, but this is what happened, is that as long as he lost, they wouldn't have given him money back. They wouldn't have stopped him probably. It was once he won that they started asking questions, how did this occur, and would not pay him. So in order to prevent this, they really need to stop the bets before the games go off. Since they did not do that, it becomes a free roll. And that's what can't be allowed. You cannot allow the casinos to do this, to where they only notice limits violations if the person's a winner. And this incentivizes that tremendously. That's the big problem here. And the other ones I've discussed, notice, these were ones that were voided before the games began. The other ones we've discussed recently have been ones where the ticket was already voided before the event started at all. and yet they were still complaining. And I said, nope, tough luck. That makes sense. Also, unlike the other ones where I talked about, he was not betting here, from what I could see, on something with egregiously wrong odds. He was just betting on things. But I will get to it. There was a method to his madness, and it appears Caesars did something pretty stupid to what they were allowing. They didn't post any crazy odds up there that were very much in the player's favor, but they were allowing something regarding the parlays that they should have caught and not allowed. And an eagle-eyed member of Poker Fraud Alert who goes by Sidewinder noticed this, and we'll discuss this shortly. So the guy who just spoke there was right. This guy who wrote the book, he said that, yeah, you can't do this after the events are complete, that you decide to void everything when the guy won. It's not fair.
Answer is Caesars owes this.
There's no rules against staying under the radar. It's horrible.
That's the bettor again, Thomas McPeek.
What they're doing to me.
In the end, it may be up to a judge to decide.
Now, this is interesting right here. Not what they just said about the judge. I mean, that's probably going to happen. They probably will be sued, Caesars. But if you pause the 4-minute, 39-second portion of the video, you'll see something very interesting. And I paused the wrong part of the video to try to find something like this. But Sidewinder, he saw what I missed. And he saw 4 tickets that CBS Chicago showed fairly clearly, not super clearly, but clearly enough to zoom in and to be able to read. It wasn't super easy to read, but you could read it if you took enough time. So he did that, and he came up with something that nobody else, to my knowledge, has mentioned anywhere, because this has had a lot of discussion on X and in other places where sports bettors congregate. This is something of interest to sports bettors and advantage players, and there's been a lot of discussion about this. People have wanted me to talk about this on the show, so here I am. And Sidewinder noticed something they did not. We'll get to that in a little bit.
McPeek says his next step would be to sue. Suzanne Lemignot, CBS News, Chicago.
The Indiana Gaming Commission says Caesars followed its rules when voiding the wagers. Now regulators in Iowa say McPeek's complaint is under review. Caesar maintains McPeek's betting activity was an attempt to circumvent the rules and as a result voided the wagers. Caesars adds McPeek can get back his money that he used to place the bets, including the losers.
That's very generous of Caesars, that after he wins, and wins big, that at that point, and at that point only, they will be willing to refund all of his wagers. It's like, hey, you bet $30,000 and you won $350,000. We're going to give you your $30,000 back. Even though some of your bets lost, we're going to give you back all of it. All $30,000. Not going to pay you the $350,000 you won, but you get your $30,000 back. They are correct that he tried to circumvent the rules there. Even he admits that. Now, it is interesting that Indiana Gaming already ruled in Caesar's favor, which is going to really screw Mr. McPeek when he tries to sue them. Because unfortunately, there's a poor understanding of this sort of thing, of what is fair in gaming, about advantage play in general, about sports betting in general. There's just a poor understanding of gambling in the court system, and even by regulators themselves. Even by gaming regulators themselves, there's often a poor understanding. And especially in places that are newer to sports betting, such as Indiana, Iowa, etc. The only place that had sports betting until less than a decade ago was Nevada. Everywhere else is new to regulating sports betting. So the regulators don't understand it very well and therefore ruled against him. And I know why they ruled against him. They thought, well, he was purposely circumventing the House limits. And the House has to have limits. They have a right to set limits. He was circumventing them, so he doesn't get paid. And they were ignoring the fact that they waited until after the contests were over to make this decision, which is huge. Again, if this were before the contest took place, I would be on Caesar's side. But because it was not, I am on his side here. But let's discuss the bets themselves. Because what was he betting on? I mentioned Sidewinder noticed something. Now, I was playing this to somebody else, and I was showing them the video, and I said, you know what? I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to try to zoom in and try to look at what bets he was placing and see if I could figure out what was really going on here, like what he was really betting on. What was it that won? What was his strategy? And then I tried, and I zoomed in, and it was just blurry. And unlike on CSI on TV, you can't just hit a sharpen button and make everything sharp. It doesn't really work that way. If the resolution is not good enough, there's really no way to sharpen it. So I just thought there was no way to see what specific bets he placed. But I paused the wrong part of the video. Later at the video, like I told you at, I think, the 4-minute, 39-second mark, you could see 4 tickets clearly enough to zoom in and read them if you squinted hard enough. So that's what Sidewinder did. And Sidewinder found something quite interesting, which I then verified he was right about. But before we get to that, I'm going to play you some takes from some other sports bettors, some people who are commentators on the sports betting industry. So I'm going to play you a segment from the VSIN sports betting channel. Listen to this.
Whether it's at the sportsbook or anywhere else in the casino, he's always helping us find an edge. It's time for Fezzik Fridays.
So Fezzik is a guy who's been around the sports betting community for a long time. He used to run a forum called Fezzik's Place. I think it's around anymore, but he's someone who's a very veteran figure in the sports betting world. There's mixed feelings about Fezzik among the sports betting community. Some think that he is no longer a winner, that he is not someone who you want to turn to for modern sports betting advice. Other people respect him, whatever. I don't really have an opinion. I haven't thought about him too much, but just telling you who he is.
Yesterday, when Crack was here, Bill Krakenberger.
Love the
So, Bill Krakenberger is another sports betting figure, and he's not here today, but they're discussing when he was there. And then there's a third person as well.
Crack. Who doesn't love the Crack, man? Each every Thursday here on the Numbers Game at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. Crack spends an hour with us. But we got into this whole discussion about this kid who won $800,000 making various bets and how the casinos are trying not to pay him. That's basically
some of the casinos.
Some of the casinos are. Is it all of them or some?
One of them paid like $135,000.
Oh, okay.
No problem.
So he got something out of it.
Yes.
Okay, so the commissioner of sports betting, Captain Jack Andrews, I believe he still has that in his bio that I call him that. He DM'd me because apparently, and by the way, apparently I raised my hand, I was not nearly thorough enough with this because we were just sort of reading it on the fly. And there were some things I didn't know about this. And Captain Jack has set the record straight on this. Would you like to hear it?
Please.
Here we go.
So they're going to play Captain Jack's, or they're going to read Captain Jack's analysis of this on X. And then they're going to be very complimentary towards Captain Jack, who, again, is another sports betting figure, regarding his analysis. And then I'm going to tell you how Captain Jack is completely wrong.
Oh, he said, hey, Gil, caught the segment with Crack about the kid in Chicago. Couple points to add to the story. One, the kid did present ID and file a W-9 on multiple occasions when Caesars asked him to, when they realized he was going over the thresholds. His play, as far as I can perceive it, that's Jack talking, was to bet on a team at the current spread and then parlay the look-ahead lines on that team, surmising that the look-ahead line would be less given their recent win. It's the kind of thing a 24-year-old might think is a plus EV parlay, of course.
Wrong. That's not what he was doing. He was doing a few different things, but as far as I know, this is not what he was doing. And the tickets that CBS showed that were winners, those had nothing to do with what they're discussing here. By the way, the main guy speaking is named Gil. He's the host of this show that they do every day. And then I guess they have various sports betting guests on certain days of the week, like this Bill Krakenberger on Thursdays, and then on Friday is Fezzik, who's the second guy here. But the main guy speaking is this guy Gil. Let's go on.
However, a chain is only as strong as the weakest link. So the EV here is less than the guy thinks, maybe even minus EV. He ran good, in other words. Caesars, this is Jack talking here, Caesars is citing structuring to avoid FinCEN rules, but as Fezzik points out, that's on Caesars to detect and protect, and it appears they actually took steps, so for them to toss that back on the bettor is a weak argument. He goes,
okay, so I don't even agree with the structuring thing, which I know we haven't really gotten to yet, but the structuring thing is complete bullshit that the casino's putting out there as an excuse, but it's not for this reason. The bettor definitely can structure, and if the bettor does structure, it is on the bettor. The bettor has then committed the crime. Now, the casino can get in trouble also for not catching the structuring. But if I try to structure at a casino in order to avoid filling out a CTR, and for whatever reason the casino doesn't stop me, they can arrest and charge me for structuring. And then they can also fine the casino for not having caught it. So I don't understand what they're trying to say, that this is something that Caesars, it's their responsibility to catch. That's not true. They are supposed to catch it, but it's also the player's responsibility not to do. But in this case, structuring should not apply anyway. So dumb take by Captain Jack there, and then repeated by Gil, and apparently agreeing it.
Goes on to say, Caesars is also citing multiple duplicate wagers to circumvent limits. However, again, this is Caesars' problem, not the bettors. To have house rules that are subject to the objective opinion of Caesars is really poor rulemaking, and Indiana gaming shouldn't permit that.
What? No, okay. That's not true either. It is very reasonable for a sportsbook to have limits. That's been established for many decades. It's also reasonable that a sportsbook can cry foul if somebody uses the kiosk to circumvent the limit, which is why I said if he was caught doing it, it's very reasonable to ban him, and it's very reasonable to refund the bets and then void them. So, again, a stupid remark by Captain Jack.
If you make two different parlays, including the same key team, is that a violation? If you bet a team at -3, it moves to -3.5, and you bet them again, is that a violation? It's ambiguous at best. The Indiana Gaming Commission has said the bettor acknowledged his bets were subject to be voided when he contacted them. See, I didn't realize he did that. However, the bettor has produced the original email in which he acknowledged they may be voided, and he wanted to avoid being free-rolled, which is what happened. The bettor got no mediation from the Indiana Gaming Commission other than a blanket reply that the sportsbook is governed by house rules, and if he's in violation of the house rules, then they back the sportsbook.
See, that's the problem. That's the big problem here. I agree with Captain Jack on that one, that this is ridiculous. That the Gaming Commission should not just say, well, you broke the rules, so them's the breaks, you don't get paid. That's not the way they should operate. It's much more complex than that. If they do not have the ability to think critically beyond you broke the house rules, you lose, then they should quit and hire better regulators, because that is not the way you regulate. Regulation is not just reading the casino rules and deciding whether the bettor violated them or did not. You have to figure out whether the regulatory and legal structure should allow the bettor to be paid, and when the printed regulations are not specific enough to the current circumstance, then you have to make a common sense ruling of what is fair, and then sometimes write new regulations. That's what good sports betting or any gambling regulation involves. It does not involve saying, well, you broke the house rules, you knew you were breaking the house rules, so you don't get paid. You don't get anything. No, that's not the way you do it. But this is the problem with these rookie gaming commissions that don't understand what they're regulating.
He finally goes on to say he does have a case that seems destined for courts. He has a case both against Caesars for having ambiguous house rules and against the IGC, the Indiana Gaming Commission, for failing to establish unambiguous house rules by one of their operators.
This is just so frustrating to listen to. No, you don't have a very good case about ambiguous house rules, and you don't have a good court case against the Gaming Commission itself. It's very hard to sue the Gaming Commission. Very, very hard. It's difficult to really sue any kind of government regulatory body for making a ruling you don't like. This is a Twitter fantasy, really, that you can do that.
Interestingly, he probably didn't commit fraud because his wagers were likely minus EV, and thus Caesars cannot prove damages resulting from the fraud.
What? Okay, first of all, whether the bets are plus or minus EV doesn't matter. It's either fraud or not fraud. There's no such thing as fraud only if the bets are positive EV. And how do you even determine that in a court of law? And then where's the fraud? Nobody's even alleging fraud here. They're alleging that he violated house rules and thus his bets are void even after winning, even after they didn't void them until they already won. But they even said he can have his money back. They're not trying to have him arrested. Fraud is a criminal offense. If it's a matter of fraud, then he should be arrested. But it's not fraud. They're not even alleging fraud. They're alleging that he circumvented rules, and therefore his bets don't count. So what's he talking about with this fraud crap? It's not even what Caesar said.
This is a likely case of a bettor who got lucky and an operator looking to find a reason not to pay because the details of how he bet seem suspicious to them. Thank you, Captain Jack Andrews, for that unbelievably thorough description there.
No, why are you thanking him? It's a terrible description. It's not thorough nor useful.
I love that description. I actually disagree with some of it, though.
Okay.
It's irrelevant whether it's a plus EV or a minus EV.
That's Fezzik. He's correct about that.
Agree with that.
All right.
Yeah.
And by the way, I did speak with Bob Nersessian, gaming lawyer here.
Not just a gaming lawyer.
The gaming lawyer. The guy,
lawyer.
If you have a beef with the casino and talk to him, and he is extremely confident this whole structuring thing is absolutely not the case, and it's not my job. I go gamble in a casino. I go gamble in Circa, all right? And I'm buying in for amounts. And he was adamant it's getting paid out that actually is the structuring aspect. Actually putting the money down is not, no one's ever going to get in trouble for like betting lots of money in the casino. And guess what? People do that all the time. They don't have to come and say, hey, by the way, just making sure you're filling out the proper paperwork and doing your job. It's not the patron, the gambler's job. The one unclear aspect of this is that if there are rules that clearly state, hey, $500 limit on kiosks, that you can bet on, all right, and you're going above those rules,
and sometimes those are posted.
Willy Wonka style, it's in the photostat copy and the rules. Get out your magnifying glass and you can read. Hey, then you do have a situation where the casino could have a voidable option where they could say, all right, you went over these rules and we are going to go ahead and lock up these tickets and refund them. We're not going to, because you went over the limits. But that just because you have a voidable contract doesn't mean you can pass post someone and wait until the actual culmination of the results and then only void it if the person loses. I'm using an analogy.
So again, he's right here. So Fezzik so far giving a pretty good analysis of this. It's funny how he says he agrees with most of what Captain Jack says, but then he's going on to really only cover the good parts. Most of that response from Captain Jack was crap, but what Fezzik's saying is correct, again, that they can't do this after the fact, after the bets win, that's definitely not fair. About the structuring, now he got this info from Bob Nersessian, who is a very well-known lawyer in Vegas who represents advantage players who are abused by the casinos, and he's been in practice for quite some time. Very useful guy to call in Nevada, especially in Vegas. If the casinos detain you or screw you in some way, he's someone who has successfully represented many gamblers, especially advantage players, over the years. And he said the structuring is BS, and basically that the structuring really only comes into play when you're cashing out, not buying in. Well, I don't know exactly what Bob said because this is being repeated by Fezzik, who might not be repeating everything verbatim. I can tell you it is still possible to structure while buying in. It is correct that the main focus on structuring by individuals is cashing out, because that's where you get money rather than give away money. However, structuring while buying in can be a thing too. So, for example, let's say you're trying to launder money and you do not want to fill out the CTR when buying in, because if you just go plop $20K at a cashier's cage and say, I want to buy in cash, you plop $20K in cash, they're going to make you fill out a CTR before giving you those chips. So let's say you say, well, I don't want to fill out one of those. I'm going to buy in for $9K. And then you bust that $9K, and then you stroll over to a different cage or a different rep at the same cage and say, yeah, I'd like to buy in for $9K, and you hand $9K and get $9K chips again. Or maybe you go to a blackjack table and buy in there and play one hand and then move over to where you really wanted to play. So you're basically going around to different spots in the casino buying in $9K, 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 $9K because you don't want to buy in over 10 at any point and fill out the CTR. Even if you walk out of the casino penniless because you bust everything, that does not mean you didn't commit structuring. And that does not mean that they may not investigate you for structuring. And that does not mean you may not be arrested and charged by the feds for structuring. So it is a real thing that buying in a structuring format can occur. And by the way, that is a form of money laundering. Because let's say you're trying to launder money. Let's say you just do $9K a day. Let's say you just go there every day and at most you buy $9K. If you win, great. And if you lose, then you go back the next day and buy $9K again. So that eliminates the CTR form from buying in, and it can just make it look like you got lucky when you would win. And even if you fill out the CTR when you cash out, it cleans the money. It launders the money. Remember, money laundering is about making the money look clean. Not making the money look like it doesn't exist, but making dirty money look clean, such as money that you win by being an illegal bookmaker or a drug dealer or anything else along those lines. So, yes, you can structure buying in as well. It is true most of the focus goes on the cashing out portion of it, but again, that doesn't exist here. And I know we still haven't gotten to the structuring part of our discussion here, but I will explain very soon why it's not structuring.
Two of them. If this kid had just loved the Cubs and he'd gone and bet the Cubs to win the World Series over and over and over and over and over again and circumvented all these limits, 500, 800, 300.
It's like my Atlanta Braves to win the division a few years ago where I bet them 17 consecutive days.
Exactly.
Yes.
There would never be a problem. There would never be an issue. So the only issue is maybe he made smart bets. What is irrelevant? Whether they're smart bets or dumb bets, it's all the same. It's like it's either okay or it's not okay. And
the later part of what he just said was correct, but the first part where he said that it's not about buying in over and over and over, they don't care. No, they do care, because that's why they have limits. Yes, of course, if they could look into the future and see that you buying in over and over and over again to bet on the same team repeatedly is going to lose. If God himself comes down and says, hey, casino, don't worry about it, dude's going to lose everything. Oh, yeah, sure, they'll let him because they know that he's going to lose. They'll benefit from it. But since they don't know this when the bets are being placed, the reason they have limits is to limit their risk to people they don't know. So that is why they have them. So no, they're not going to let someone do that if they see them doing it, if they know that's what's going on. It's not just about if the person wins. Now, yes, they could be doing something very dirty and say, hey, we're going to ignore this breaking of the rules until the guy wins. But I actually don't think that's what happened here. I think this was more of an unintentional free roll where they just didn't look into what was happening until he placed a bunch of tickets that he put in at the kiosk, like a big stack of them all bet on the same game that resulted in a 6-figure win. And they're like, how the hell this happened? That's what happened. And then they didn't want to pay. That's really just what happened here. I don't agree with it. I think he should have been paid. But I think that's what happened here. So Fezzik wrong with the whole thing of they don't care if you place the same bet over and over, or it should be okay, or it's not really violating their limits. It definitely is. It's not violating the law. I don't hold it against someone who tries this. And by the way, I noticed this a long time ago. When I saw this kiosk, I'm like, wait a minute. So can't pretty much anyone bet at these for over and over if they want to get around limits? That's the first thing I thought when I saw those kiosks. But let's go on.
And the fact that any casino that waited until those tickets resolved itself and then tried to decide whether they would have action or not, it would be like me. I walked to a blackjack table. One more analogy. $500 limits, clearly labeled. And I'm betting $2,000 a hand. And they're paying me, they're dealing. But clearly it says $500 limit. But I'm betting $2,000. I play for an hour. I win $100,000. The casino says, excuse me, there's a $500 limit, so we are going to go ahead and we need that $75,000. We're not going to pay you for that $75,000 win. You went above the limit, but you accepted the wagers.
Okay, that's again a terrible analogy. Why? Because a kiosk is not a human being. A kiosk is not even an AI. A kiosk does not have a way, at least not at the moment, to think critically about the bets being placed. It just processes the bets that are fed into it. It is very dumb. It does not attempt to analyze anything, and it's not expected to. So if you're at a blackjack table and you're betting $2,000 a hand at a $500 limit table, and they're accepting the bets, and a human being is accepting the bets, which of course they would be because you have a human dealer who's running the whole thing, and then later they go, oh, you know what? You shouldn't have been betting this much. We're not going to pay you. That's against the law. They can't do that because they've accepted the bet and they have to pay. But that's different than a kiosk accepting it, where people can use that to take advantage of the house limits and exceed them that way by specifically going to the kiosk where there's no one monitoring it. Like, that's just absurd. There's a very big difference between taking advantage of an automated system and getting a human being to agree to accept something on behalf of the company. Very big difference.
That trumps any placard or sign that says that's the limit.
Well, see, the interesting thing is, and what's getting lost in here, I think, is you make a point there about how it's the free rolling, right?
Yes.
So you can't wait to the event to be done before you then decide to, adjudicate. So what I think we're kind of getting here is that the casino has some sort of burden on them. What we are kind of saying is to adjudicate it beforehand. This is, again, and may I relate it back to my thing with the Westgate, right? This notion is crazy to casinos. You have to tell the bettors, but you have to contact the bettors beforehand and let them know this is voided. And of course, there is no burden on casinos to do that. So
okay, let me stop it right here. You don't have to tell the bettors. So if someone places wagers at the kiosk, they may not even be contactable. They're just holding tickets. The tickets are not in anybody's name. They don't have a phone number attached to them. So there's no way to do that. So I don't know what he's talking about here. What they can do is they could have these kiosks do a little bit of analysis. So if there's a lot of wagers entered consecutively or near consecutively in an abnormal pattern, all in the same thing, or mostly on the same thing, then it should signal a human being to come take a look. And if they notice something's wrong, then they can void it, and they can contact gaming and say, we are voiding this. Just to go on record right now, we are voiding it before this game begins. So this way it can be shown after the fact that when the bettor comes back and tries to collect, no, we voided it. And if they can get a hold of them, they can say, hey, yeah, we voided it, and pay the guy back, give him a refund. Void doesn't mean you lose. That means you just get a refund. So they can either void it and contact them if there's contact information, or they can void it and pay the money back if that person ever returns. And then they can ban him if they want. Something along those lines. So make their best effort to return the money to whoever does it. Then it's up to them if they want to ban him. And have the kiosk signal a human being at the sportsbook when it's noticing abnormal patterns like this. And then they can void it before the game begins. But what's going on here, to where it's not till afterwards, is not good. Now, let me get to the structuring. So what the guy did was slam in a lot of bets of a few $100 each on the same contests. I don't think they were all on one particular set of bets on one ticket. He did do a lot of duplicates, but it may have been several different types of tickets he put in. But he was entering a lot of tickets over and over and over that were identical to one another for like $300 each. And again, he admits it was to circumvent limits, so we don't even have to discuss whether he was or wasn't. Now, structuring, if you remember, is where someone is intentionally, as they say, structuring their transactions, their financial cash transactions, to where they don't have to fill out a CTR form. That's entirely what structuring is. It's avoiding the CTR form. And if what you're doing is not actively avoiding the CTR form, but is engaging in some other kind of deception that's aimed at the casino that isn't even illegal, whether it's legal or not actually doesn't matter here, but to where the amount being bet isn't for purposes of avoiding a CTR, but rather avoiding something else that has nothing to do with money laundering and nothing to do with the CTR, then it's not structuring. Just because you place a bunch of cash wagers that add up to more than 10K and don't fill out a CTR does not mean that you were engaging in structuring. I'll give you another example. And this kind of goes along with what was being said earlier by Fezzik regarding the buying in versus cashing out. Let's say I'm at a poker table and I'm just getting my ass beat. I'm just losing and losing and losing. So I keep losing 2K at a time. So I buy in 2K, lose it. Buy another 2K, lose it. Buy another 2K, lose it. Buy another 2K, lose it. Well, now I'm down 8K. So I'm tilting. I want to get it all back. I buy another 2K, which now makes 10K. I lose it. Now I try to buy in again. Now at this point, I should have to fill out a CTR form because I've done 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and I've done 5 2s, making 10K. And now the second I buy in anymore, even for $1, I should have to fill out a CTR because in one day I have made more than $10,000 worth of buy-ins. So let's say I call over the chip runner and say I'd like to do another 2K. But it's not the same chip runner every time, and because it's 2K, nobody's noticing anything, and I'm not trying to get around a CTR form. All I'm thinking about is I'm just trying to rebuy and win my money back. So they give me another 2K. Nobody even thinks of a CTR. Let's say I buy in 3 more times after that for a total of 18K. So I had 9 transactions of 2K each with various chip runners that I'm not specifically trying to get different chip runners. It's just different ones are around. It's a big card room. Sometimes I walk up myself and do it. Whatever it is. I just did 9 transactions of 2K. Lost everything. Walk out frustrated, down 18K. Never fill out a CTR. Did the law say I should have filled out a CTR? Yes. Did the casino mess up by not keeping better track of my buy-ins, and could they be fined for this? Yes. Though a single instance is not likely to result in that. But if they have a chronic issue with this, then yes, they could be fined. But would I ever be charged with structuring for this? No, because it's obvious what's going on there. It's obvious what's happening here is I'm just a gambler who's losing, who's just frantically rebuying over and over, and then I happen to pass 10K, and I may not even know it. I may not even be counting at the moment how much I'm down. A lot of people don't count how much they're down. They just frantically keep buying in, buying in, buying in. It's not even required of a gambler to know how much he's down. So that's why structuring prosecutions always revolve around the person knowing what they're doing, that they are knowingly making transactions, whether buying in or cashing out, that are circumventing having to fill out that CTR form. That is what structuring is. It's not accidentally structuring. It's where you know what you're doing. So again, like my example, if you want to cash out 30K and you show up cashing out 9, the next day 9, the next day 7, the next day 4.
I'll have 2 number 9s, a number 9 large, a number 6 with extra dip, a number 7, 2 number 45s, 1 with cheese, and a large soda.
If you did that on 4 consecutive days, that would be pretty suspicious. Now, maybe you could come up with an excuse, but if you did this every time you won 5 figures, if you never filled out a CTR form, you're always doing 9, 8, 7 over and over and over again until it gets the money out, that's obviously structuring. You'd have very little defense. That is the type of thing that would be prosecuted. Not an accidental structuring because you happen to buy in a bunch of times in a row and you're not even thinking of filling out the CTR, and it happens to add up to more than 5 figures. Now let's look at Thomas McPeek's case here. He was putting in small bet after small bet after small bet. Now, was this to avoid a CTR? No. It's very clear what he was avoiding. The house rules. He was avoiding them not letting him place the wagers. He's not trying to avoid reporting this. He's trying to avoid being denied. He's trying to avoid them saying, sorry, can't bet this much. So there's no way they would hit him with structuring here because it's very clear what he's doing. It's very clear what his intentions are. His intentions are to get large wagers down on certain sports contests that otherwise would not be allowed if he did it with a human being. So he's doing this with a machine. He's clearly not doing this for any kind of money laundering or to avoid the CTR. In fact, if they were to allow him to place one large wager rather than feeding into the kiosk for 4 hours a bunch of small wagers, 100% he'd do the large wager. I think everybody knows that. I think the IRS would know that. I think everyone would know that. He's not doing this for it not to be seen by the IRS. Because guess what? When he gets paid, the IRS will definitely get notification of that. There's no way around that. So when he goes in to get $450,000, they inform the IRS. So the last thing he'd want is where there's no record of his losses and only of his wins. So if he could just place the large wager in the first place, he'd fill out the damn CTR, and that wouldn't be a factor here. So there's no structuring going on. It's very clear he's not doing this for structuring reasons. He's doing this for avoidance of denial of these bets. So that's why the structuring thing is such bullshit. They're hiding behind it because technically he placed more than 10K worth of bets, and they're saying, well, you placed more than 10K worth of bets and you didn't fill out a CTR. Well, it is true. They're kind of tattling on themselves there because it is their responsibility as well to catch this. They can't just say, well, it's a kiosk, what can we do? Well, what you can do is you can have someone standing there watching the kiosk and make sure you don't have a dude sitting there for 4 hours entering bets. That's what you can do. So they can't just shrug their shoulders and say, well, but it's a machine, what can we do? We can't stop him from not filling out a CTR. There's a lot of things they could do. They could have the kiosks force people to identify themselves. They could have a security guard just watching what's going on. Whatever. They can't just absolve themselves of responsibility. And as far as the buying in portion, it is more their responsibility than the gamblers, unless the gambler is clearly trying to avoid the CTR, which he was not. So let's just throw out the structuring thing. That's an excuse. As far as violating the house rules to place bets over and over, yes, he definitely did violate that. He knows he violated it. That's why he was using the kiosks. The whole thing about staying under the radar, that's not quite what he was doing. It was more just to get the bets down that would not be allowed. But let's get back to what Sidewinder discovered. Now, I had said that I couldn't see what he was betting when I tried to zoom in. But I was not pausing the right place. But when Sidewinder posted his screenshot of what he had found at the 4-minute 39-second mark, and I zoomed in, I'm like, oh, you can read it. And before I read it, he read it, and he noticed something. He noticed that at least on these 4 tickets, they were all identical to one another, that Mr. Thomas McPeek wasn't just betting randomly or taking shots at parlays to get lucky. Thomas McPeek was betting on something known as correlated parlays. Now, you may not know what that is, but I'll explain it. So I know you're not all sports betting experts. Correlated parlays are parlay bets where if one leg of the parlay wins, it makes other legs of the parlay more likely to win, meaning that they're not really separate bets. I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say I want to bet on the Dodgers tomorrow. Let's say the Dodgers are playing the Braves. And I bet a parlay that the Dodgers will be ahead after 5 innings and the Dodgers will win the game. Well, they would never give me that sort of parlay. No sportsbook would write that kind of ticket for me because if the Dodgers are ahead after 5 innings, then it becomes a lot more likely that they're going to win the game than it was before the game started. So basically, if the 5-inning bet wins, there's a high chance the 9-inning bet will win. Not always, but it greatly increases the odds. So you can't treat them as 2 separate bets you can put together as a parlay. Because a parlay is normally a bunch of bets that are totally unrelated to one another, that are together and you have to win them all, and then you win a big multiple of what you originally bet. But if it's all different forms of the same thing, then if one wins, it's fairly likely the rest will all win, and then you should not be paid these long parlay odds. So that's called correlated parlays, and for a very long time, these have not been allowed at sportsbooks. When I say not allowed, it's not illegal, but this is the type of thing they just will not allow you to place, where if you try to place them, they'll say, nope, it's a correlated parlay, we're not taking this bet. However, if they do take the bet, then if you win it, they have to pay you. So you haven't broken any kind of rules by placing a correlated parlay. They have to pay you if you win a correlated parlay. But they can reject the bet, and just about every book these days will. And the few that won't are shady books that aren't regulated, and then they just don't pay you when they realize what you're pulling on them. I know some people this happened to that placed some correlated parlays on some stupid sports books online that are not regulated, won a bunch of money, and then the book realized what was going on. It's like, nope, we're banning you and not paying you anything. So that's what you risk when you try to pull shenanigans on those type of sites. But at a regulated sportsbook, yes, if you can get them to give you a correlated parlay and write you that ticket, then yes, they'll pay it if it wins. And if you find one of those, you should do it and keep your mouth shut, and you'll make a lot of money until they catch on. Well, Mr. McPeek was, believe it or not, betting on correlated parlays at the Caesars Sportsbook, of all places. Which shocks me. How could they be so stupid? How can the Caesars Sportsbook be so stupid to allow him to bet on correlated parlays? But he did through the kiosk. And I think the kiosk is the key here. Because a human being working at the sportsbook will notice if you do a correlated parlay, unless it's one that's very well disguised, which is pretty much very hard to do. But he was betting on very obvious correlated parlays. So I'll tell you what he bet on these tickets. 4 identical tickets for $300 each for plus 10,000, meaning he gets paid 100 times his money. He gets $30K for his $300 bet if it wins. All of these have to hit for him to win. So he bet on an NFL game of Houston versus Jacksonville. These were the 6 legs of his parlay. C.J. Stroud, the quarterback for Houston, over 1.5 passing touchdowns, meaning that Stroud has to pass for a touchdown at least twice. Trevor Lawrence, the Jacksonville quarterback, same thing, over 1.5 passing touchdowns, meaning, again, Lawrence has to throw 2 touchdowns via pass or more for that to win. Stephon Diggs, a wide receiver at Houston, to score a touchdown, meaning 1 or more touchdowns. Nico Collins, Houston wide receiver, to score a touchdown. Christian Kirk, Houston wide receiver, to score a touchdown. And then Brian Thomas Jr., Jacksonville wide receiver, to score a touchdown. Well, I think you already see where this is going. If the quarterback of Houston throws 2 or more passing touchdowns, then it is likely that the wide receivers on Houston will also be scoring touchdowns because they'll be receiving the touchdowns. It's not always the wide receiver to receive the touchdowns, but a lot of times it is. And same with the Jacksonville quarterback. If you bet on him to throw 2 or more passing touchdowns, then betting on the Jacksonville wide receivers to score at least 1 touchdown, that becomes very correlated. So this should not be 100-to-1 odds. They shouldn't write this ticket at all, but if they're going to, it should not be anywhere near 100-to-1 odds because it's all correlated. Because if these passing touchdowns are thrown, the first 2 legs of it, that really raises the odds that these wide receivers will have scored a touchdown. So sure enough, this was one of them that won. So he was placing a very obvious correlated parlay. Now, had he done this at the counter, they would have laughed at him. They would have said, wait a minute. So, no. You can't do something like this. This is a correlated parlay. We're not writing this for you. But the kiosk did not say that. The kiosk was not programmed to reject it. Now, according to Sidewinder, you may want to keep this in mind if you are at a casino and you see a kiosk. You may want to try it yourself. I'm not even kidding, because it's not illegal. It's a form of advantage play. Sidewinder said the kiosks are notorious for allowing correlated parlays. He felt that this was obvious what was going on. He said he didn't even need to see the tickets to know that's what happened, but he did see them, and he posted them. He's right. He wrote, based on their unit size, they probably made a ton doing this at the kiosks, probably all over the country, and Caesars finally cried uncle after paying him on or people that he knows a bunch. The unit sizes and win amounts being a bigger gambling bankroll, in my opinion. Now, he's right that I don't think this 24-year-old kid just showed up with this type of bankroll to start firing all this. Maybe his parents are backing it. Maybe other gamblers are helping him. But he came up with the money in the first place somehow. But that's not really important here. It is interesting. It is interesting that these kiosks are, quote, notorious for allowing correlated parlays. And it is possible this is part of a major clampdown against correlated parlays. And maybe that is what made Caesars really take notice here. Maybe this is why they didn't want to pay. It wasn't just that he was placing a lot in circumventing limits. It may have been that he was circumventing limits and placing correlated parlays. So here the dude shows up, drops a stack of tickets all in the same bets, and says, hey, I won these, cashed them for $450K, and they look, and it's basically the same ticket over and over and over again for $300 that wins $30K each. And in addition, they're correlated parlays. And they're like, oh, fuck. This guy is angling us big time. So no, we're not paying you, F you. You both went around our limits and did correlated parlays through the kiosk, so we didn't catch them. So F you, we're not paying you. I think that's a good theory by Sidewinder that this has a lot to do with why they didn't pay. Because it wasn't just circumventing their limits, it was also correlating the parlays. Now, why didn't they say this publicly? They probably don't want to draw attention to the fact that you can get these through the kiosks. I don't think they want to give anyone any ideas. Now, I don't know if it's that no sports bettors discussing this realized it, if they didn't pause and analyze what they see on the tickets like Sidewinder did, and like I tried but paused the wrong part of the video and couldn't read it. I don't know if nobody else did what Sidewinder did, or if they did and somehow missed it, or if they did notice, but they just didn't want to say it because maybe they're going to try it themselves. They don't want the word getting out about the kiosks. I don't know. So apparently he was able to do this at Caesars. Now maybe Caesars has finally realized this and clamped down on it. But maybe just the technology is not there yet. Not that it couldn't be, but maybe they just have not programmed it yet to stop these. And that is very interesting. These kiosks, which have existed for years, are dumb enough, I mean, they obviously were, to accept these type of bets. But that's very interesting. That changes this a lot. It doesn't change my opinion as to who was right and wrong, but it does change this as to what might have been Caesar's motivation, or at least partial motivation, to refuse this. It's really one of these things where it might be a compound effect, where had he just walked up with the same ticket over and over, and they knew he circumvented the limits, they may have just paid it, even if they banned him afterwards. But I think that plus the correlated parlay was just so offensive to Caesars, they're like, nope, we're not paying you, get the fuck out of here. Something along those lines. It's an interesting story. I'm on the kid's side, but interesting story. Now, before I finish this topic, I do want to give you one other point of view on these correlated parlays as it has to do with this situation. Go Buckos, who has called into the show before and also posted on the forum, feels that not only may these correlated parlays not have been positive expectation, the casino may have been very aware they were offering them. He said, it's not quite this simple. Look at the top of the tickets. It says, quote, same game parlay. These are a relatively new feature. These are specifically there to allow correlated parlays. Notice there is no price listed next to each individual leg of the wager. The final price offered to the bettor takes into account not only the price around each individual leg, but also the level of correlation between the events. This is by design. The guy didn't find some hack, at least not in the tickets I see here. That said, Sidewinder is correct when he talks about some insane stuff being allowed to be parlayed at full odds in some places where kiosks first became a thing 5 or 6 years ago. He's also correct that Mississippi was the epicenter of this for a while when sports betting was first introduced there. This same-game parlay feature was built specifically to avoid this while holding some of the highest percentages out there for the house. You can Google it. So that is interesting. So if you didn't understand all that, basically, Go Buckos was saying that they realize there's actually money to be made in allowing same-game parlays and then just very, very much degrading what they pay out. So they're saying, yeah, sure, you can correlate parlays, but we're going to pay you a lot less. And that these are kind of sucker bets because people think, oh, correlated parlays, we can do these and we can make all kinds of money. And wow, I can't believe Caesars is allowing this. And then in reality, they're giving odds that are so low that people don't realize that the household on average is very high. And these are actually very negative expectation. That's the point that Go Buckos is trying to make. Now, he's at least partially correct here because it's true. It does say same game parlay. So this was allowed to parlay things in the same game. However, that does not mean it's negative expectation. And Sidewinder, in fact, responded. He said these parlays, referring to the ones that Thomas McPeek did that we were talking about, were definitely positive expectation. Maybe they didn't adjust the payoff price down enough. You think this guy spent hours feeding money into a kiosk, betting the same thing over and over because he was a degenerate? Also, it's not, quote, Caesars allowing all this stuff. It's often outsourced, kiosk software, app software, sometimes even line management, etc. However dumb you think someone can be, your brain can't process how stupid the people running these places are. They don't move on action, outsource line management, and regularly cut off players or send them to approval for literally no reason. Sending them to approval means just a larger bet is placed and they just send it to be approved by someone higher when there's really no good reason to do it. There are some smart places like Circa or Prime Sportsbook, but every other stateside bookmaker are completely lost, which is why they have to stiff people and literally have whole teams of people whose only jobs are to limit customers. Truly remarkable. So, I think I agree with Sidewinder here. I just can't imagine a kid like this, who puts a lot of research into what he's doing, being dumb enough to place very negative expectation same-game parlays, even if Caesars is allowing this and is degrading the payback, knowing that these would be correlated. So it's very possible he found that these are so well correlated that they are not degrading it enough, making this positive expectation. I think that's the most likely answer. I don't think he was this stupid. I don't know enough about the expected odds in this type of situation, if it's not correlated, to where I can figure out if 100 to 1 would be a good or bad payout here. And of course, there'd be a lot of adjustments one would have to make having to do with the correlation. So it's a hard calculation for me to make personally, and I'm not going to try. But I have a feeling that this kid found something, and they realized that. But thank you also to Go Buccos for pointing out that these correlated parlays that they are allowing at these kiosks are not necessarily positive expectation because they downgrade the payout so much. So you got to be careful when you do that. So interesting forum discussion there, and thank you guys for participating. You can text me 775-372-8355. 775-375. I messed up my own phone number. 775-372-8355. Little news for you. At the moment, you can actually text the Mount Charleston line. Don't ask me how, but you can actually text the Mount Charleston line. In the restructuring of my phones, I have temporarily moved the Mount Charleston line to a different service. So I hate to admit this, but the Mount Charleston line is presently not an old 70s rotary phone. I never thought I would say this, but the phone still exists. The physical Mount Charleston line phone still exists. It actually has a different number now. But in order to preserve that number and make it compatible with future services that I use to take calls on the show, I had to, at least for the moment, convert the Mount Charleston line into a voice over IP number. I ported out the Mount Charleston line, as sad as it is, and I have a different Mount Charleston phone number that I'm not going to give out right now because it's at my cabin in Mount Charleston. I don't need you guys hassling me there because it's not connected to the show. But I've changed that number in Mount Charleston, and I've ported the number off to a voice over IP service. And then I'm going to try to link it all back together to where it is the old 70s rotary phone again forwarding to me. We'll eventually get there again. We'll eventually restore order. But yeah, you can try. You can try texting me, 702-430-1808 on the Mount Charleston line. You'll see I'll respond. It's the first time ever you can text that number. I could not receive text on it before, but now I can. Even old 70s rotary phones can eventually receive text again. I see in the chat room, Blissy6969, my listener from Australia, at least one of several. He said, great to hear your voice drop. Well, thank you, Blissy. Glad to have you here listening in Australia, where it's a much better hour. Right now, I don't know what part of Australia he's in, but I know that in Sydney right now, it is 7 hours earlier. I shouldn't say the next day. It's actually technically the same day. But it's really 17 hours later, but I see it as like 7 hours earlier. So that would make it to where it is 9:44 p.m. 9:44? No, sorry, 7:44 p.m. 9:44 would be 5 hours. 7:44 p.m. in Sydney right now. Much easier time to listen. He's in Melbourne, he said. Melbourne, we have a new poker room. That's right, he told me he's in Melbourne. I don't know, I keep forgetting this. All right, so I'm going to move on to a different topic, though. I think we've covered enough of that one. I really wanted to talk about that one, though. People kept wanting me to talk about it, too. I got so many texts about this topic with Thomas McPeek and the tickets they would not pay. So let's move on. What should I talk about next? Oh, PropSwap. This isn't as current of a topic. This goes back to mid-April. But this hasn't gotten much press, like not as much as it deserved. It's got some discussion on Twitter. And I tried to invite the victim on this show, and he responded to me, but he said, no thanks. I don't want to appear, but thank you. Nothing against me. He didn't really know me, but he just didn't want to appear on any shows. Anyway, let me tell you about the PropSwap thing. It's an interesting story, and it really shows how poorly some of these type of services are managed. So PropSwap, what is that? You probably haven't heard of it unless you saw the whole controversy a few weeks ago. PropSwap is a service that has existed since 2015. It facilitates the trades of prop tickets, usually sports bets, before they have fully resolved. For example, let's say you bought a $1,000 wager on the first team to win 20 games for Major League Baseball in 2025. Now, I realize this is already completed now because a team already has won 20 games. But let's just say it was beforehand, before the season began. You bought a $1,000 ticket for the San Francisco Giants to win 20 games first, and the odds were plus 6,000, meaning 60 to 1. So then, as what really happened in 2025, the Giants were tied for the first team to make it to 11 wins. So when the Giants had won 11, nobody had won more than 11. So obviously at that point, that $1,000 ticket on the Giants to be the first to 20 wins has a lot more equity than the $1,000 that was originally paid for it. But it also has a lot less equity than the $61,000 equity it would have if it won. So the way these tickets are written, they either have the full value when they win or zero, and nothing in between. But in the middle, they have equity, depending upon how they're going. So at the time when the Giants were tied for the Major League lead with 11 wins, they were a lot less than 60 to 1. And when I say less, I mean more likely, as far as winning 20 games first. They ended up not being the ones to do it, but they came very close. Anyway, the result of that doesn't matter. It's just an example. So let's say you are holding that ticket at the point where the Giants have won 11 and are tied for the lead. They still have a while to go. They'll win 9 more before anyone else does. And you think to yourself, I wish I could just take the equity right now. Like if I could cash this for $16,000 today, I'd take it. Well, PropSwap is what enables that. So if you can find a buyer that's another individual, then you can sell your prop tickets to somebody else before they resolve at any point, just for a price that you both agree. So you post up on PropSwap, okay, hey, I've got this ticket for the Giants. They are tied for Major League lead for 11 games. If they're the first to 20, this thing wins at 60 to 1. I'll sell it for 16 to 1. $16K, it's yours. So if somebody says, yeah, that seems like a good deal, then you could hook up through PropSwap, and then PropSwap will arrange this transaction. That's the theory behind PropSwap, and some people were using it. It wasn't a huge hit. I mean, it's existed for 10 years. You probably hadn't heard of it, at least not until a few weeks ago. But it existed to where it had enough activity to where the founder, whose name is Luke Pergrande, or Pergrand, I don't know how you spell it, Pergrande. I don't know how you spell it. I don't know how you say it. Luke Pergrande, that's what we're going to call him. He's the founder and the current CEO as well. It kind of looks like a one-man operation to me. But if it's not, it's like a two-man operation. It's not very large operationally, but he's the guy. Anyway, the whole process is a bit more involved than you might think. Because how do people actually exchange the ticket and the money to where nobody gets screwed? How does PropSwap ensure this? So here's the process. The seller lists their ticket at the price that they want. If the buyer agrees to the price, then someone browses it and says, yeah, I like that price, then the buyer pays PropSwap directly, not the person whose ticket it is. The buyer actually pays PropSwap. Now, at this point, the seller is instructed to send the physical ticket. Remember, this is a physical prop ticket that you got at a sportsbook. The seller is instructed to send the physical prop ticket to PropSwap via FedEx or USPS. Once PropSwap receives that ticket through FedEx or the mail, then they take a 10% commission, and then they release the rest of it to the seller. So in this $16K example, PropSwap would take $1,600 and then kick the other $14,400 to the seller. However, this part's a little bit weird. This is according to PropSwap's own website. They also place a hold on the credit card of the seller, not the buyer, but the seller, until the ticket can be verified as authentic. And they hold it until the bet resolves. So the weird part is that PropSwap then places a hold on the credit card of the seller, not the buyer, but the seller, until they can verify that the ticket is authentic. I'm not sure which way they do it, but they make sure not to take that hold off the credit card of the seller until they can verify the ticket is authentic. So it's kind of weird. They pay the person, but then also hold it against their credit card. Then once they verify it's authentic, they take off the credit card hold, but they still hold the physical ticket in their hands until the bet resolves. So if it's a prop bet that's not going to resolve for months, they're going to hold the ticket for months. Once the prop bet ticket wins, then they send it to the buyer to cash it himself. That is the way it works on there, according to their own website. If the prop bet loses, then they don't even bother sending the ticket because it's worthless. Well, an unexpected situation came up, and this was involving an NFL game, so it actually happened back in January. But it was brought to everyone's attention in April, on April 8th. And it involved a buyer who had used PropSwap a number of times named the Cat 123454. At least that's his name on Twitter. The Cat 123454. This guy got screwed by the seller. It involved an Eagles Super Bowl championship ticket paying $38,292, which the Cat bought for $5,400. So the Eagles were not the favorite to win the Super Bowl this past NFL season. They were one of the upper echelon teams, but not like one of the highest echelon teams. They were kind of they're seen as good but not great after a number of disappointing seasons where they underperformed. So finally they overperformed and they won the Super Bowl. So at some point he bought this for $5,400. This ticket that was going to be paying out $38,292. The Cat got the bad news that the ticket was actually never sent in by the seller as he was supposed to do. And there was also an issue with the seller collecting the full money on the ticket. So instead of sending in the ticket to PropSwap, the seller just never did it. The seller put up the auction and somehow got paid, but he never actually sent in the physical ticket to PropSwap. And then when the seller went to go collect the money on the ticket and then send it over to the buyer, who was this Cat guy, there was an issue because there was actually an IRS tax withholding from the ticket, which I will explain in a little bit. So for some time, the Cat got nothing at all because basically the seller said, oh, sorry, tried to cash it, IRS took a bunch of my money, nothing I can do, sorry, I can give you whatever they gave me, but that's it. And the Cat's like, you got to be fucking kidding me. No, you owe me $38K. Pay it. So for a while, the Cat got nothing at all. The tax matter occurred because the ticket had odds greater than 300 to 1. And this was something I didn't realize, but I just learned from this situation. If the odds of what you won on a sports betting ticket are more than 300 to 1, then there will be withholding, whereas usually there's not. Usually you just get paid for winning something, and that's it. But if the payout is at least 300 times your wager, then there can be withholdings. That's 24% for purposes of income taxes. So anyway, that was withheld. And this is covered in the PropSwap terms of service, that if you have placed a prop bet where this withholding will occur, you have to post the after-tax amount and not the pre-tax amount. So this seller probably didn't realize this. And so when he went to collect the $38,292, then the IRS withheld 24% of it. And then the cat was not willing to accept anything as a compromise. So the cat raised the issue to PropSwap and said, hey, look, you guys are like StubHub, right? Where if I get screwed on a transaction with a third party, you guys cover it, right? You guys are charging 10%, so you can afford to cover it in these cases where this occurs, right? And PropSwap told him, no, we're not covering this at all. PropSwap said instead they will try to get the seller to pay the whole thing. They'll put pressure on him, but that's as far as they'll go. So they had their lawyer call up the seller, and they just frantically hassled the seller. Come on, pay the cat, pay the cat, pay that cat. Come on, we're going to sue you. You're going to be in trouble. You better do this. You better do this. So finally, the seller coughed up $25,700 over to the cat via PropSwap. They sent it to PropSwap, who then sent it to the cat. And the funny thing was, they were actually very proud of themselves. PropSwap said, see, we told you, leave it to us, and we got this much out of him. We got $25,700, and he wasn't giving you anything at first. But we got $25,700, and we're still trying for more. So we haven't given up. But we've gotten this so far. So look what we've done for you. Look at all the work we're putting in to get this for you here. We never guaranteed any of this, they're telling him. And he's like, what the hell? What are you charging you 10% for then? If this is just a service to match up with people who want to buy and sell tickets, then you shouldn't take 10%. You should take something much lower. But if you're going to take 10%, especially with big tickets like this, then you need to guarantee something. And if you don't, you got to be very clear you're not, and you guys are not clear that you don't. And they were like, no, look, you're an ingrate. They didn't say that, but that's what they're implying. We put in so much work to get this much for you. We're still working on the remaining $12.5K. So appreciate what we've done. This is what they wrote to him. He actually posted it up on X. We understand your frustration with this ticket. Trust us, we are extremely upset as well, if not more so. More so. I don't think they're more upset than he is. He's the one who got stiffed. The $25,711 we've obtained for you so far is hopefully exemplary of the work we've put in so far to reach out to the seller. Gotta be kidding me. For more transparency, here's the steps we've taken so far. 1, paid our legal counsel with company funds to reach out with the seller multiple times, including legal demands. The cat should be thankful that they paid their own money for their lawyer to hassle the guy who owes him money. As if they're just like getting involved when they don't need to. As if they're doing him a favor. It'd be like if I hired my lawyer to go hassle the guy who owes the cat. Well, yeah, if my lawyer got money out of that seller for the cat and I foot the bill for it when I have no connection to the situation at all, yeah, the cat should be very grateful that I put up the lawyer and spent the money on him. But this is their service. Why are they bragging about this, that they had their lawyer for their service that screwed the cat, put pressure on the guy who screwed him? That's crazy. Number 2, they wrote, delegated multiple employees at PropSwap to ensure the situation never happens again on the site, e.g., manual review of every ticket that gets posted on PropSwap. So they're wanting the cat to thank them for going forward, changing their procedures where their employees are now examining the tickets posted more closely. How does that help the cat? That helps them, the company. I've had this before too, like where a company screws me and I bring it up to them and say, oh yeah, it's been a teaching moment. We've learned we're not going to let this happen again to anybody. And I'm like, okay, but what about me? Oh, sorry, we can't fix you, but it's not going to happen in the future. We're going to make sure everybody else is going to not have this problem. We're not going to make you whole, but we're going to help everybody else not have this occur to them. And I'm like, guys, I'm not your free consultant. I'm bringing this to your attention to make it right for me. Now, if in addition you want to make changes so this doesn't happen again, I encourage that. But that's not my issue. That's not my problem. That's not my concern. Unless you want to hire me as a consultant here. So that's basically what they're saying to him. Oh, well, you should be grateful that we're hiring more people to, or at least either hiring or directing our existing employees to monitor everything more closely so this doesn't happen again to anybody else. 3, increase steps in our seller onboarding process to ensure the federal tax withholding on winners from the sportsbook in the state are very clear when listing tickets. This is so stupid. Here's the problems, okay? First of all, I read their FAQ at the time that this whole controversy broke, long after they emailed them this. It's still not clear. I don't care about the onboarding process. It should be like super clear with every ticket posted. Anything short of that is not doing enough. But again, that's not something he should be thanking them for. This can be something they say in addition to resolving it. But this doesn't help resolve it for the cat to say what they're going to do in the future so that this won't happen again. You got to fix this issue first. Anyway, they went back and forth about this. The cat wrote on Twitter at the time on April 8th when he was bringing this public. That was when everybody became aware of it. I've had good experiences with PropSwap in the past, but unfortunately, this ticket I've been owed $12,581 for coming up on 2 months. I paid $5,400 up front to purchase the ticket when I bought it in December. Unfortunately, after the ticket won, the seller does not want to pay the full amount of $38,292, and PropSwap does not want to make up the difference. But it gets worse. It gets far worse. So PropSwap's email was already bizarre, as I told you. They wouldn't cover the difference. They bragged about all the money they spent and all the employee time they spent on contacting the seller and preventing this from happening again. When the cat posted this of course drew the immediate ire of most of the sports betting community. People were outraged that PropSwap was not covering the shortages like this against the buyers, given that they're taking a hefty 10% commission. What's the point of taking such a large commission if they're not going to cover anything? If all they're doing is matching them with buyers, they should not be getting 10%, especially of large tickets. And if that is true, why was it not clearly disclosed on the site before anyone makes any transaction that these are not guaranteed? Because that would influence people's decision to buy on there. And again, last time I checked in mid-April, the site's own FAQ still said nothing about the buyer taking any risk. 11 hours after the situation was exposed by the cat, PropSwap attempted to calm the angry people. They put up a very stupid statement on X that rivals ACR for dumb social media statements. By the way, ACR made another dumb social media statement recently too, which I'll get to as our next topic. But let's stick to this one for right now. This is what the owner and founder, presumably, he didn't sign it, but that's presumably who wrote it, of PropSwap wrote in a statement on X. Hey everyone, we wanted to provide a bit more context into the winning Eagles sale that the cat 123454 bought in December. This bet had original odds of greater than 300 to 1, therefore it had federal taxes and state taxes withheld. The seller was paid $25,711 by Caesars. He then sent those funds to us, of which we sent directly to the cat. The seller did indeed incorrectly list the tickets for a pre-tax amount, not the past-tax amount, even after a mandatory Zoom interview with PropSwap management during his onboarding, of which we remind all sellers that they must list tickets post-tax, not pre-tax. You've got to be kidding me. A Zoom interview? Where they remind them? I mean, I guess if that's what you want to do, but how about just putting it every time that somebody lists a ticket in big print? Acknowledgement. This amount is going to be the post-tax amount if any taxes are charged. And if this is a 300-to-1 payout, there will be taxes of 24%. So do you want to recalculate? Something like that. They don't need a freaking Zoom call where they remind him. Remember, when you post your ticket, if it's more than 300 to 1, remember, you have to do it post-tax, not pre-tax, the amount. Remember. I can only imagine that call. The Zoom onboarding, a Zoom interview. What are they talking about? Are they really interviewing every seller on Zoom? That is so strange. It goes on to say, we believe it was an honest mistake. However, legally, he is obligated to transmit to PropSwap the full collected amount for any bet he posts on our site, referring to the seller. It is important to remember that PropSwap is not a sportsbook, and we do not guarantee winnings. This is why buyers get better odds than a traditional sportsbook quite consistently, because you are buying from other gamblers, not PropSwap. No, that's not what's happening. Traditional sportsbooks don't let you just go in and cash out your prop tickets midstream. Now, yes, you can hedge it, but hedging can be complicated. Sometimes you can't get enough action down. Sometimes there's too many different things to hedge. So this is a simpler way to do it. But this isn't why bettors get better odds with doing it through PropSwap. It should be very simple. If they're just matching buyers and sellers, they should take a very small commission. If they are guaranteeing something, then they can take a large commission. That's the same reason that StubHub takes a large commission. StubHub charges about 23% commission on their sales of tickets. This way, when every once in a while someone gets screwed, they can easily afford to cover it. So that's baked into the price. Here, they're charging 10%, which is still a very hefty commission, and yet they're not giving you anything except for matching you up. Then they went on to write even a more ridiculous thing. We are eBay, we are StubHub, we are StockX, and rest assured, fraud happens on those sites daily at a far greater rate than PropSwap. Okay, but those sites will cover it. So you're not eBay or StubHub or StockX because those sites cover the fraud, and you don't. Amazing. Amazing. How obnoxious is this that they compare themselves to these much bigger services that cover it when people get defrauded? We are eBay, we are StubHub. You got to be fucking kidding me. To be transparent, the rate of a not fully paid out sale on PropSwap over the last 12 months is 0.002. No, sorry, I got that wrong. 0.0002 of our sales. So hold on a second. Wait a minute. If it really is 0.0002% of your sales, I mean, that's tiny. 0.0002. I don't know if that's a real figure, but that means 1 out of every 500,000 sales, which I have to wonder if they really make 500,000 sales. Maybe what they really mean is 0.02, not 0.0002. But if you take them at what they say, that's 1 out of every 500,000 sales have some kind of fraud on it. So taking 10% of those, you can't afford to pay that one time out of 500,000? Even out of 5,000. If you're taking 10% of every transaction and you have to cover part of one once out of every 5,000 times, you're doing great. Even if you have to cover the whole thing. If this is so rare, then you should totally be able to cover it. He finished off with saying, we will continue to work with the buyer and try to reach a reasonable conclusion for all parties. Thanks and enjoy the Masters. This occurred during the Masters golf event. When it wasn't about the Masters, but that's when it was taking place. And in fact, the CEO and owner of PropSwap was at the Masters. That's why he probably mentioned that. So this statement got people even more outraged. And people were wondering, why would this company torch its reputation in what was getting to be a growing social media viral situation over a matter of just $12.5K? Why wouldn't they just cover the rest and say, oops, sorry about that. Yeah, we're going to cover it. Were they really this clueless? Well, apparently yes, because it got worse. Got even worse. So first of all, it's not even clear why the ticket was never sent to PropSwap. Like, what happened to this whole thing of, like, we don't pay the seller until we actually get the ticket and make sure it's real? So what happened to that? How come they even paid the guy? So it's possible this wasn't like a premeditated scam or anything, but that the seller just didn't have the money. And for whatever reason, he never sent the ticket in. And then PropSwap somehow paid him anyway. So it shows you how bad their process is, that this guy totally violated it the whole way and they still paid him. Talking about the seller. So I'm guessing what happened here is this guy broke it to the buyer, the cat, that he couldn't pay him the whole 38 whatever. And the cat's like, what the fuck? No, you owe this to me. And the guy said, nope, accept the $25K and call it a day, or otherwise I'm not sending anything. And the cat probably said, well, then F you, I'm not accepting that. And then the cat went to PropSwap. PropSwap said, okay, we'll take care of this. They probably had their lawyer harass the seller until the seller at least coughed up the $25,711 that he was paid by Caesars, and then said, look, I don't have the rest. I can't send $12.5K. I don't have $12.5K. But anyway, the statement from PropSwap was very arrogant. It was basically just saying, look, we did a lot for this guy. Instead of, this guy got screwed on our service and we didn't cover it despite our hefty fees. And they just dug in their heels. I mean, they just got clobbered so hard on social media. Every single response was just killing them. Just killing them. And yet they were doubling down and tripling down on X. They absolutely would not pay that other $12.5K. However, on April 10th, and this all moved very fast, so 2 days later, after a ton of social media outrage, the cat posted an update. This was one that actually was much more positive towards PropSwap than they deserved. He posted the following. Update. Today I talked with PropSwap's CEO on the phone and they offered me $6,000 today, which I am happy about receiving. They also shared with me a plan about options for the full $12.5K moving forward and improvements they are making to their process to prevent this sort of situation from occurring in the future. They wrote a public statement and will be sharing it on their X profile as well as appearing on Elf's Spaces today. Now, Elf is a young guy who's been running these sports betting themed spaces that have been pretty popular lately. There's a lot of controversy around the Elf Spaces, but I won't even get into that. Elf doesn't have anything to do with this other than hosting the PropSwap guy on there in this particular case. So the cat was almost satisfied with this resolution. He got another $6K. He was only owed $6,500 and looked like he was almost ready to let this go. But the public was not satisfied. The public was pissed. And when this statement, remember that the cat said a statement is forthcoming, another statement from PropSwap about this. When this statement was posted that I'm about to read you, everyone just flipped out because they couldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe it. There's no way you can even picture what they were about to do unless you've heard the story already. So here's what PropSwap posted next. Okay, everyone, here's the deal. While we continue to work with the Eagles seller, we wanted to come forward with a solution. PropSwap will come out of pocket with $6,000 today, immediately paid to the cat. If everyone comes together who said they'd never use PropSwap, because there's a bunch of people on X saying, I'm never using this site, you guys are a bunch of crooks, screw you guys, you don't cover any fraud on here, you're useless. So he said, if everyone comes together who said they'd never use PropSwap, and if we can find 1,200 new users of a deposit of $10 or more for each new user in the next 24 hours, we will fully reimburse the cat, no question to ask, for $12,561. Deposits can be used for any ticket available on PropSwap, your choice. Sound fair to everyone? You got to be kidding me. You can also use a unique promo code, THECAT, to get a free 100% match on whatever you choose to deposit. Oh my gosh. They actually were using this as a promotion. They actually turned someone ripping off one of their users, something that wasn't even supposed to be possible, because remember, they weren't supposed to release the money until they got the ticket in their hands. And that didn't even happen. But there were still ways fraud could occur. So they're taking 10% out of each. They can't afford to cover $12,500 that this cat guy gets shorted. And after a social media outrage, their solution is to make the community sign up and deposit enough money to cover it. Because $1,200, they didn't pull that number out of their ass. 1,200 new users who have to deposit $10 minimum each in the next 24 hours which would be $12,000 in new deposits, and then they will send the full $12,561 to the cat. Now, they'd already sent $6,000 of it, but they're only going to send the remaining $6,500 if they get $12,000 worth of new deposits. From 1,200 different users. They're basically saying, you guys are all saying you're never going to use our site. Well, okay, you want to make the cat whole? You want him to come away with the money he was expecting? Okay, let's see you put your money where your mouth is. Sign up for our service and deposit $10 each. And if we get 1,200 of you, then we'll take that money and pay the cat. And they actually made a promo code, the cat, to get an extra bonus. Can you imagine this? They're actually using this as a promo? As you can imagine, everybody was really pissed off when they saw this. People were pissed off and perplexed. How could this guy be killing the reputation of their decade-old company so quickly and so stupidly and over a matter of relatively small money? Even Jeffrey Benson, the very visible director of operations of the Circa Sportsbook, couldn't keep his mouth shut. He responded to the tweet posting this, which, by the way, was deleted and I preserved. He responded to the tweet before it was deleted, simply with a GIF of Mr. Rogers, that is, the television host, the children's television host, now deceased, Mr. Rogers, putting on a clown mask, which is a popular meme that people post when someone's acting like a clown on X. And definitely this PropSwap owner was. So PropSwap actually responded back to Jeffrey Benson and said, "Thanks, Jeff. Did you ever use us when we were live in Nevada?" Now, what does that have to do with it? So wait, Jeffrey Benson had to be a customer of their site to call them clowns? No. Anyone with a brain can call them a clown. Jeffrey Benson responded, "No, and I'd never use or recommend you in the future. Pay the cat the whole $12K. You've handled this whole thing extremely poorly, all while doubling and tripling down throughout the process, while literally everyone told you otherwise. Tweeting through it hasn't been a good choice. Log off." Yeah, that is 100% correct. PropSwap responds back, "And why didn't you use us before this situation?" This guy just can't get over how some people wouldn't use them. Some people weren't members before this. So Jeffrey said back, "Way to move the goalposts. You can fuck all the way off." So a guy named Dan Leafshatz, one of their critics, said, "Jesus Christ, guys, stop making this worse. It's $12K. PropSwap says back, "There are companies that guarantee bets, and they're called a sportsbook. We believe the 0.002%, I keep making the mistake, of risk is worth getting the best odds globally." And then someone named Jake said, "Nobody's putting money in after all this bullshit." And PropSwap said back, "That's your choice. We keep thousands of customers very happy each year." Person named Bresbets, Bresbets, wrote, "This is one of the only things that was worse than doing nothing, LOL. Thanks, but I will never use a platform I can't trust. Also, your point earlier that platforms like eBay and Amazon have fraud on them, so we should accept the fraud on your platform, is downright insane." And PropSwap wrote back, "We are doing a far better job of preventing fraud than eBay does." That's what we're saying. Yeah, but you're not covering the fraud. That's apples and oranges. A person named Brent Evans, who goes by Brent_A_Evans on X, wrote, "If someone sues McDonald's after getting norovirus, imagine McDonald's saying that they'll pay out the lawsuit only if enough of us come buy a Big Mac." That's making fun of his promo. And PropSwap says back, "The point is everyone has been pocket watching the last week. Are you saying that if we all put up 12,561, you'll join?" So this idiot who runs PropSwap is really trying to put this on the community to make the cat whole, not him. He's saying, "Hey guys, how could you be commenting on this and saying how awful it is that the cat got cheated if you won't put up the money for him? Because it's not their business. It's not their problem. You can comment on someone getting financially screwed without having to put up the money for that person instead of the business doing it. I comment all the time on people getting screwed by businesses, and I don't offer up my own money to make the person whole who got victimized. That's not my responsibility. You can easily comment on these things without putting up the money when it's not your responsibility to do, when you have nothing to do with it. But this idiot on PropSwap is like, hey, look, why won't you join my site and help make the money to give this guy? A person named Captain Jackson wrote, go fuck yourself. PropSwap said, if you've actually used the service, we're happy to hear how it went. What, fucking himself? I don't know what he means by that. Otherwise, you can put your money where your mouth is. So this idiot really thinks that they've got to sign up to his service to comment on him. PropSwap said, plenty of trolls out there. We're curious who will actually put their money where their mouth is, he says again. A person named James Cato says, y'all are too damn dumb to realize that PropSwap are the only ones not willing to put their money where their mouth is, which is true. Y'all single-handedly allowed that ticket to be listed incorrectly. Therefore, it's your responsibility to rectify your own mistake. Correct. Well, finally, PropSwap cried uncle and paid out the full amount to the cat. This is like the following day after that disastrous promotion. But only after they already destroyed their reputation forever. I don't think anyone will trust them ever again. In their final statement on the matter, they limited the replies to only the relatively few people that they follow. Nobody else can respond to this, what they're about to write. They also have not allowed replies from the public on any of their subsequent tweets regarding different subjects that have nothing to do with this. So they were in lockdown mode. Let me see if they still are. This was as of mid-April. Okay, I guess they're allowing comments again, but nobody's answering them. They've been posting like baseball stuff. That's just nobody's answering them. So finally, after, I guess, a few weeks, they put themselves back into where people could reply to them in general. But everyone's ignoring them now, so I think they're pretty much done. I don't think they were huge before this, but now they're really done. Here's their final statement. Well, Twitter, this has been quite a learning experience. After a silly request to ask customers to deposit after a poor situation, we've made the decision on Elf's Spaces to fully pay out the cat. We're also giving him additional compensation as a bonus for being a great sport about this. This is a one-time situation because of the misunderstanding with the taxes being withheld because the odds were more than 300 to 1. We continue to be proud of a 0.0002% fraud rate on PropSwap. We'd encourage all of our users to check out our seller star rating and view the completed sales underneath each person's username and each ticket. That will provide transparency into each seller's reputation on the site. So what about the CEO, the guy who's been writing all this shit, this Luke Pergrande? Well, he was at the Masters and actually posted a picture of himself. Someone commented that he looked exactly like they expected. He just kind of like a douchey guy. People wondered how can he afford to attend the Masters and can't afford $12.5K to not ruin his whole business. It's a good question. Now, I'm going to play you a little bit of the discussion between Luke Pergrande and some people on Elf's Spaces who are sports betting figures and also people who run a competing site that does guarantee bets like this. So I'm going to play you portions of this Spaces. It went on for a while, but I'm going to play you starting the 27-minute mark and then again at the 54-minute, 27-second mark. At the 54-minute is where the Wager Wire CEO comes on and really owns Luke Pergrande. Wager Wire is their competitor. But let's listen to Luke himself making excuses for why they did their ridiculous marketing offer.
Post-tax, we will immediately deactivate it. We do it daily. And again, we tried to catch them all. They were doing a moderate review. It is now a full 100% review of all tickets that get posted to make sure this tax situation never happens again. And I wanted to share that after talking to the buyer, to the cat, we actually are indeed going to fulfill our end of the bargain and make sure he is completely made whole on the the additional 12 and a half thousand.
Okay, so you guys are officially stating that he's going to be made whole.
No. Wait, but you can't say it's way worse for you to say the only reason we're doing this one-off is because of the reaction of the community. Do you not answer to investors that realize that you've just burnt down the entire business you created in 2 days?
I'm not going to agree to that. We'll be okay.
But you just said that you were fulfilling your end of the bargain, which is true. You had whether it was written in legalese or not, you had an implied contract with the buyer of this that said, if I purchase something on this platform, I will get paid out in full. That is now gone. Why would anyone use this platform? You use it as a marketing stunt.
Yeah, that's not what the contract says. That's not what that says.
Right. It is. you seem to lack understanding that like there is an understanding between a buyer and a seller in a marketplace that both parties will act in good faith based on a common set of circumstances. Prior to this, everyone assumed everyone who purchased on your platform assumed they would be paid out in full. They no longer have that assumption. So why would they ever use you again?
Because our fraud rate is 0.0002%.
You get that that's a horrible response, right?
I would disagree with you.
Okay, I'm gonna shift the topic. So 2 hours ago, you guys tweeted, and I know you guys have stated that you're gonna make him completely whole. You tweeted, "We're putting up 6,000 guaranteed. Let's see if we can get the cat the full bounce by tomorrow."
That's the elf talking.
You guys tweeted, "Okay, everyone, here's the deal. While we continue to work with the Eagle seller, we wanted to come forward with a solution. PropSwap will come out of pocket with 6K today, paid to the cat. If everyone comes together who said they'd never use PropSwap, we can find 1,200 new users. Any deposit of $10 for a new user in the next 24 hours will be fully reimbursed. It'll go to the cat. No questions asked.
No.
With
not going to the cat, but no, we're not crowdsourcing this. But keep going.
Yeah. Okay. Any deposit of $10 for a new user in the next 24 hours will fully reimburse the cat. No questions asked with 12,561.
Correct.
Deposits can be used for any ticket available on PropSwap, your choice. Sound fair to everyone. So what was I guess your like vision there, like for tweeting that?
So
like how did you envision it?
We talked a lot.
Go ahead.
Talked a lot about it this morning. The point of today was on Twitter. You know, to use Scott Van Pelt's words, Twitter is a cesspool, and unfortunately, gambling Twitter might be worse sometimes. It's more negative than positive by a very wide margin. So our point was, okay, people are, I looked up a lot of people who were criticizing PropSwap to see if they had user accounts. Most notably Jeff Benson and then Rufus Peabody. Neither of those guys have PropSwap accounts and a few others as well. But our point was, we find it interesting that nobody who has ever used the service is going to criticize us. But then, a lot of our current users, I thought have been pretty happy over the years. And the point simply was, if you haven't used the service, okay, let's use the service. Tell us how you like it. And then, put your money where your mouth is. That was the point of the promotion.
That's a really weird point the guy was making. Really, really weird. He's obsessed with people using his service to comment on it. It's just so weird that this is the line he keeps taking.
Obviously, it did not go well. We've gotten a lot of slack over the past few hours. So, of course, we're going to scrap that. But that was the spirit of it. I just, we're kind of getting sick of people who have never used the product as being harsh critics. So our point was, okay, we'll work our way towards making the cat full. And by the way, to be clear, this wasn't crowdsourcing. This was, if we get $10 at 1,200 new users, that's $12,000. We make 13% margin, 10% from the seller and 3% from the buyer. So that is, $1,600. That's not going to cover what we're going to pay the cat. So yeah, that was the spirit of the promotion today.
Okay. And then I guess the way that the public viewed it was that you guys were using this, there was a big outcry from the public to encourage new users was, I guess, the public sentiment on that.
Understood. That is in no way what we were trying to accomplish. We've spent lots and lots of money on advertising over the years to accomplish that. Today was not one of those times. It was simply, okay, anyone that's been a critic, let's put your money where your mouth is, as opposed to just pocket watching and not actually trying the service. That's all. That was the spirit of today. It's
dude, that's an insane fucking take. The idea that the community can't stick up for someone who was fucked by you because they haven't tried your app is one of the worst PR decisions and thoughts I've heard in months on gambling Twitter.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I understand your position, but our point was let's get people to try and use the service before they criticize. That's all we were trying to do.
We don't need to use the service to criticize you failing to pay someone out.
Obviously, you can comment when a company screws someone without being a customer there, nor should someone have to sign up for your service in order to comment on someone getting screwed by your service. Unless being a customer would allow you to see something that you're already missing and that you couldn't see until you get on there. But then the question is, why wouldn't he just show people what they're missing? But nobody's missing anything. People fully see what's happening, and they say, it sucks. You guys are cheating this cat guy, and we don't need to be a member to see that. Being a member will not allow us to see it any better. Even if we love your service, we would still say you're cheating the cat. The way he's processing this is like, you have to look at us overall. Yeah, we screwed the cat here, which they're not really saying they screwed. But even if you think we screwed the cat, most people don't get screwed. And if you just spend some time on here, you'll see how these type of situations barely ever come up. So if you're there a while and notice that, then you won't be as angry about this. But that's very flawed thinking, because you will be angry because when something goes wrong, then you see how they handle it, which is very, very poorly, and the victim gets screwed, and they do not make that person whole despite the hefty fees they're taking. It's similar to if you have a friend, and then when you really need that friend, they disappear on you, and they're not there for you, then you say, okay, well, I've learned the character of this friend because they were not here for me when I really needed them. Whereas when I'm going through normal times or good times and I don't need anything from them, then they're happy to be around me when I'm zero burden to them. But the second I'm even a little bit of a burden that they can help me, they don't want to do it. They're not a real friend. So sometimes it takes a crisis to realize who is really reputable and who your friends are. Now, this isn't a friend situation. This is a business situation. But if it takes a non-standard thing coming up to realize the business will screw you, that's when you learn the business sucks. In fact, I've had that experience many times before myself using businesses, that when there's standard transactions occurring, everything's fine. But the second something out of the ordinary happens, they treat me like shit. And I go, okay, well, I've learned about them. I'm not coming back. So just because my first 10 transactions might have been good, if transaction number 11, they screw me, I can't fall back on, well, the first 10 were good. I will look at, okay, the first time something non-standard occurred, they mishandled it and screwed me over. I don't give them credit for the first 10 that were just simple and straightforward. But that seems to be Luke Pergrande's belief, that if you go on PropSwap and don't get cheated, then you'll be okay with someone getting cheated occasionally. It's a really strange take. Let me skip to the 54-minute, 27-second mark, where you get to hear just a complete owning of Luke Pergrande, courtesy of a competitor.
But then, then why is WagerWire is guaranteeing all tickets? So why are they able to do that?
I'm not going to comment on those folks.
I might jump in here and comment since our name got brought up a couple of times. Zach Doctor, CEO of WagerWire here. Look, I think there are some unfortunate realities of the non-integrated method and that what PropSwap does. And we really designed WagerWire with this whole integrated method with sportsbooks, with fantasy operators to solve all this. But it's still, I feel like a lot of this is in the weeds and missing kind of the bigger picture here.
Let me stop. What he means by integrated method is he's saying that WagerWire actually partnered with certain sports books and fantasy sites to allow WagerWire to take over the tickets and fully automate the process so you don't have to worry about physical tickets being sent in and everything like that. Kind of like how StubHub is now contracted with these major sports teams like Major League Baseball. So, for example, if I buy a ticket on StubHub for a Dodgers game, the person who owned the ticket originally does not have to send it directly to me. That person has already given StubHub permission to take the ticket from them through the Dodgers and transfer it to me. So when I get to Dodger Stadium, even if I have lost my ticket in some way, the Dodgers can look it up and see that the ticket now belongs to me, because the Dodgers and StubHub now have an agreement that they will process these transfers directly. So WagerWire has something similar going on. That's what he means by integrated. But he's saying that's not even the bigger picture here. Let's hear what the bigger picture is.
Of like, if there's counterparty risk, then this is kind of a trust-based system, and that you as the intermediary do need to make good on something like this, and we take that extremely seriously. So we only would sell a bet if we could back it up. And if this is only $12,000, like, it feels like a no-brainer to just make the guy whole, especially when he's one of your power buyers. So like, why did it break down like this? And like over 2 months now that it came out publicly, like, you had every opportunity to just do something sooner. Like, I feel like this is everything for a secondary market, is just have trust between buyers and sellers, right?
He thought he could get away with it.
Yeah, I mean, again, if the question right now is Luke or the PropSwap employees like upset or not upset about this, trust me, guys, like, we are extremely upset.
That is not the question. Nobody is asking that.
Let them ice. Go ahead, Luke.
So trust me, we are extremely upset about it. And Zach, if you guys are guaranteeing bets, I mean, that's more power to you. I'd happy to talk shop offline about how you're doing that.
We're not doing it contractually, like you said, but we have an implied deal with our buyers and sellers, and we would work if there was an issue, like you kind of referenced earlier, where something happened between us on a Chiefs ticket. Like, we were fully prepared to make our buyer whole if like, if there was an issue, right? And I think you have to be prepared to do that and have liquidity for it if you're going to be doing big bet sales like this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would point to a winning Ohio State bet from January that paid out $405,000, and the buyer got $405,000 once Ohio State won. So like, there are many thousands and thousands of bets every year that we're following through on. And again, it sucks to this happen. We're moderately happy with our fraud rate. We're not ecstatic. It's not zero, and we're going to do our best moving forward.
Do you think from this point forward, with your static fraud rate at 0.004%, that it's going to be higher going forward today, lower going forward today, or stay the same?
I'd hope it's lower. Like I said, we've made some changes into the seller onboarding process. My goal is to have that number approach zero. We spent a lot of money on legal and like I said, like, I'm CEO of the company, and I'm taking time out of my day to interview sellers, which I'm happy to do. They're the lifeblood of how we make this business.
This is so weird. The CEO is interviewing sellers. There's something wrong with that whole company, the whole process. It's so weird. Interviewing sellers, onboarding. This doesn't make much sense. This whole thing's so strange. The guy does not see. He just has no idea how powerful social media is, and the last thing you want is to destroy the trust in your company over a matter of $12,000. You just don't want to do it. That's a huge mistake. And for him to stick to these weird points of, you have to try our service before you comment on it, or we have such a low fraud rate, so when fraud does occur, oh well, you're just very unlucky, but we're not helping, besides asking the seller nicely to pay. What this WagerWire CEO was saying was correct. If you're going to allow big value tickets to be posted on your service, then you need the liquidity to back it if something goes wrong with the transaction. And if you don't have that type of money, then don't allow tickets of that size to be posted. Or charge very low fees and make it very clear that all you're doing is matching people up and you take no responsibility. About 30 years ago, I ran a very primitive version of StubHub. And I wish I made it into more, because, maybe I could have eventually had something like StubHub before StubHub and I could be a billionaire now. That would be nice. And I kind of thought of doing something like that. I just never did. But I had a ticket exchange that I started for the Dodgers only, because I was a Dodgers fan. And I just noticed that at the time, of course, there was no StubHub. It was not easy to get tickets on the secondary market without going directly to scalpers. And I knew people who would sometimes have a hard time finding people to sell their tickets to, especially last minute. And I found others who didn't know anyone to buy good tickets from. and had to go to scalpers. And I said, wouldn't it be nice if we just kept the scalpers out of it, just let Dodgers fans find Dodgers fans? So I ran a free service that was called the Dodger Watch Ticket Exchange. And it was a pretty simple website, but people would post up their tickets. They'd post their phone number or email address or both in their listing, and they'd list where the tickets were. And I had a little map of the stadium up there for people to see. And then buyers, potential buyers, would see this, and they would contact these people in some way. And then once the tickets were sold, then I would actually be contacted by the seller, and I would manually remove the listing. So it was a pretty primitive system at the time, and I didn't put a lot of time into it. But people did use it, and the people who used it liked it, and it did its job. But one thing I was very clear about was I'm not getting involved if anything goes wrong, because I wasn't charging for it. It was a free service I had up there. So I said, this is a free service. This is for you two to find each other. If anyone gets screwed, not my problem. But, however, I will post any warnings about anyone who commits fraud for the future. So let me know if this happens. But I'm not guaranteeing any of these sales. Now, fortunately, nobody ever got cheated. I never got a report of anyone getting cheated. But the point is that had I been charging a large fee, then I would have guaranteed it. So mine was free. You can't expect much when you're getting something for free. But even if I was charging very little money, let's say I charged $5 to post your listing up there, obviously it wouldn't be realistic for me to guarantee all sales. I'm collecting $5 to match a buyer and seller. But if I was charging a lot more than that, yeah, of course, then it would make sense for me to intervene and pay someone when they get screwed, either on the buyer or seller side. Anyway, I don't think PropSwap is going to be very viable going forward. I still don't understand if the fraud is really this rare, why they couldn't cover it. That should especially mean they have the money to do so. You can't have it both ways. Either you have a high fraud rate to where you cannot afford to cover the fraud because it would bankrupt you, or the fraud rate's super low, therefore your fees should easily cover it many times over. There's no way you can say both are true. There's no way you can say we can't afford to cover this. Oh, but our fraud rate almost never happens. Like it's so low, it's virtually zero. It's got to be one or the other. It's either a problem or not a problem. Anyway, there's something wrong with this guy, this Luke, the CEO. That business is not going to survive very long. I think that wager wire, that has a future. PropSwap, not so much. Okay, well, this is a poker show, and we haven't covered poker yet. I get those complaints sometimes that we're covering too many other things and not poker. I had someone write a review on one of the podcasting platforms that the show's not even about poker. They gave it 1 star. Wasn't very nice. So, in order to prevent more 1-star reviews, I'm going to cover a poker topic right now. Then I'm going to shut it down because I'm kind of getting tired. But I want to talk about ACR again, as I promised. Let's talk about another company very bad at social media. It's ACR. So there's more issues again surrounding the GTO Wizard issue and the pros on ACR. I mean the sponsored pros, not just pro players who play on there, who were caught using it. GTO Wizard, of course, being a software package that you can use that shows you how to play better. It's supposed to be a learning tool, but some people use it to analyze hands they're presently in, which of course is equivalent to botting, which is a form of cheating. You're basically getting real-time assistance as you play your hands, which is definitely cheating. Because any decision you make while in a poker hand needs to be from your own brain and your own brain only. Should not be from other people, and it should not be from a computer advising you. So using GTO Wizard is cheating, for sure. There is a dual scandal that came to light in 2025, one about something that occurred in 2025, one about something that occurred in 2024 but was just discovered in 2025, where 2 sponsored pros on ACR, Nacho Barbero and Ebony Kenny, both independently of each other, about a year apart, posted pictures of themselves in the Venom tournament, which is the signature tournament on ACR, with GTO Wizard in the background. So it sparked a lot of controversies, you might guess. There was a lot of back and forth about that. ACR handled it very badly multiple times. They originally called Nacho a goofball, and they were saying that he's not a person who plays GTO style, so they're not worried about it. He wasn't cheating. It's fine. And that really went over badly. That instead of saying, hey, yeah, that's pretty bad, we're going to look into this and see what we're going to do and preferably fire Nacho for this. They said, he's a goofball. Don't worry about him. He would never cheat. He doesn't play GTO. He's just a goofball and we love him. Like, it was crazy. So that went off terribly. And then when it was found that a year prior that Ebony Kenny had made the same mistake and also posted a screenshot with GTO Wizard in the background, they again didn't fire Ebony, and they downplayed that, and they never did anything about it. And again, they claimed that they reached the same conclusion as they did with Goofball Nacho, that there was no cheating going on, everything's cool. So that went over very poorly as well. And Ebony posted a very bullshitty excuse about what she was doing. So let's fast forward. That was back earlier in the year. Let's fast forward to April. The story gets even dumber, which is hard to believe, but it has. It's gotten even dumber. So props to Ike Haxton here. I'm going to play a little exchange where Nacho Barbero and Ike Haxton were sitting next to one another at a PokerGo event. Conrad Simpson clipped it and posted it to X, and it got a lot of attention. But props to Ike Haxton for asking Nacho about it and trying to get him to comment on this. I have a lot of disagreements with Ike Haxton. I don't think he's a bad guy. I just don't agree with him about a lot, especially politically. But even, he wears a mask at every tournament, which I don't think is right, especially not right. He takes the winners' photos with the mask, which of course he can do, but it's just very condescending. It's kind of just trolling everybody in his winners' photos, which I think is bad form. Like, he won't even admit it either. He won't even admit that the wearing it in the winners' photos is trolling, which it is. Like, I've talked about that on here before. And then there's a reasonable debate about wearing a mask at all these days in tournaments, that it gives you an edge from physical tells. So there's a lot I don't agree with Ike Haxton on, again, especially politically and socially. But as I've said before, I don't think he's a bad person. I think he's an honest guy. He's never been involved in any kind of cheating scandal, never owed anyone money to my knowledge, and has never mistreated anyone. So I'll give him credit for all of that. And he's a smart guy. And, a lot of times you get someone controversial at your poker table, and it's harder to speak up and say something to them about their controversy and ask them the tough questions. A lot of times people have the balls to do it on Twitter, but not in person. Well, Ike Haxton, who by no means is a tough guy physically, he asked Nacho, not in a hostile way, but in a pretty direct way, about his feelings on all this, and it ended up having an impact. So let's listen to the exchange between Nacho and Ike Haxton on PokerGo.
I'm surprised ACR didn't just catch it automatically, to be honest.
Ike Haxton started with, I don't know if it started here, but this is where the clip starts, that Conrad Simpson posted to X. Ike Haxton said, I'm surprised they didn't catch it automatically, referring to the usage of GTO Wizard by Nacho and others.
Have GTO Wizard open on your computer while you're playing and ACR doesn't even know?
So Nacho kind of laughed. Then I continued. So to have GTO Wizard open on your computer during the tournament, ACR doesn't even know?
10 seconds. Are they even trying?
I don't think they're trying.
Wow. So that was a little clip. Nacho only really said one thing. I don't think they're trying. Ike said, you have GTO Wizard on your computer while you're playing the tournament? They don't even know? Are they even trying? And Nacho said back, I don't even think they're trying. They're not even trying. Listen to this again. I'll play you the whole 22-second clip.
I'm surprised ACR didn't just catch it automatically, to be honest. You just have GTO Wizard open on your computer while you're playing and ACR doesn't even know? Are they even trying?
I don't think they're trying.
So that got a lot of angry responses again to ACR. That their own pro, Nacho Barbero, that was caught using GTO Wizard in the background when he was playing the Venom, claimed he wasn't using it, claimed he had it just open from before, but no one believed him. Ike Haxton says, what, you have that open on your computer playing on their tournament? They don't even catch it? Are they even trying? And Nacho says, I don't think they're trying. So people wonder, what's going to happen here now? Nacho making a critical statement about ACR, that they're not even trying to catch the cheating. By the way, notice that Nacho didn't say, oh, no, I wasn't using it for cheating. Like, he didn't even try that on Ike. He's like, laughs and then says, I don't think they're trying. He didn't say, oh, no. As I said there, it was a misunderstanding. It was up for my students earlier, and I just never closed it. He didn't even try that shit on Ike because he knew that Ike knew the truth. He knew that Ike and the rest of us know the truth. He didn't even try to run that line on him. He's like, yeah, I don't think they're trying, and laughs. So what was ACR going to do about this now that one of their own pros says that they're not trying to keep the games safe? So presumably Phil Nagy, the owner of ACR, who usually operates the ACR_poker account on Twitter, aka X, that account wrote, at ACR Poker, we take our game integrity and our responsibility to ensure a fair and competitive environment for all players seriously. We expect the same from the ambassadors who represent our brand. The expectation has been tested a lot this year, and in light of recent comments made by ACR ambassador Nacho Barbero on a live poker stream, comments which misrepresented our stance on third-party software and game integrity, we have already reached out to Nacho to discuss this event and consider his future with ACR. So then Chase Davis, who's a poker pro, wrote back, oh, so he's not just a goofy goofball when it hurts you, only when it hurts us? Cool, go fuck yourself. Someone else wrote back to Chase, exactly this, I'm a longtime loyal player, but supporting ACR anymore just feels wrong. And ACR just got destroyed in the comments with things like this, because everyone's like, wait a minute, so Nacho uses GTO Wizard, stupidly posts a screenshot of him using GTO Wizard, and puts up a lame excuse as to why he was up there, which nobody believes, and you guys don't fire him. You guys just call him a goofball and say it's all cool. So your players get cheated, you're fine with it, but when he says ACR isn't doing enough to stop cheating in general, then you fire him. So they really took flack for turning their ire upon Nacho for criticizing them, but not for the cheating itself. And that's a very good point on the part of the players. Isn't that stupid? Oh my God, they keep shooting themselves in the foot. Like, every time that account posts about any kind of controversy, they just make things worse. Like, it's really a tough one between this Luke Pergrande guy of PropSwap and Phil Nagy of ACR of who is dumber on social media. They are both incredibly bad at social media. If you run a company and you're on social media, you've got to be real careful about what you post, especially when your company gets in controversy. The main thing you want to do is bring down the controversy. Do not make it worse. Do not make excuses. Do not address issues that people don't want to see addressed, or try to avoid the main issue, or try to point fingers, or try to make excuses, or lie, or gaslight. If you do things like this, the public on social media gets very, very angry. It's better just not to respond than do anything like that. If you are going to respond, you need to put something that is going to calm everybody. Show them that you're taking care of the matter, and then follow it up with action. And if you've made a mistake, just own the mistake. Do not make excuses. Do not downplay it. Do not blame it on others, unless you have concrete proof that you're in the right. But it's amazing how ACR repeatedly messes up on social media and just takes every controversy and makes it 10 times worse, much like PropSwap did. And Nacho has been fired, by the way. So no more Nacho on ACR. No longer a sponsored pro. And it took him criticizing ACR to do that. Cheating on the Venom tournament? That's fine. He's just a goofball. But yeah, if you go to their page, Nacho's gone. If you go to americascardroom.eu/pros, still have Ebony Kenny. They haven't fired her. All she did is cheat. She didn't criticize ACR, so she's still there. You have Chris Moneymaker, Ebony Kenny, Chris Moorman, Anna Marquez, Katie Lindsay, who, by the way, is the wife of Chris Moorman, Drew Gonzalez, Monica Zukowitz, whoever that is, John Party, Rob Kuhn, Jeff Boski. He'll basically take anything that hires him. And Michael Lonkar. No more Nacho. Really, this roster of pros gets pretty thin as you scroll through it. I mean, obviously, Chris Moneymaker's a huge name, and at least people know Ebony and Chris Moorman, though Ebony's got her problems, as we've talked about many times here. The rest of them, well, whatever. Not exactly A-list names, but ACR takes what it can get. And also, to be an ACR pro, you have to be willing to take all the incoming fire from ACR haters whenever things like this occur. Okay, let's move on to a Vegas topic. This is something that isn't even covered very often since it broke. In fact, I could have been the first one to break it, and then I didn't. Not just on the show, but like on my site. And I just didn't. I meant to. But when I read about it, I was still in Arizona. So I just didn't have time. Anyway, have you heard of Caesars Republic? Yes, you heard me right. Caesars Republic. And you're probably asking, what the hell are you talking about? Are you saying that is Caesars a country now? Is Caesars trying to become a country? What is Caesars Republic? Well, Caesars Republic is a stupid name of a new brand of hotels that Caesars has started. At some point, Caesars decided that it was time to get into the luxury non-gaming hotel industry. They thought to themselves, why do we necessarily need a casino attached to our hotels? Why don't we just start luxury hotels that have nice restaurants, maybe even shows, spa, whatever, just everything but the casino. Then we can open it anywhere. We don't need a license other than a standard business license. We don't need to worry about gambling laws. We can just run hotels. We know how to run hotels. So we'll just run hotels minus the casino. Yeah, Caesars Republic. So that was the new brand. And the first and then only Caesars Republic hotel was Caesars Republic Scottsdale, which of course is in the Phoenix area of Arizona. Of course, that's a non-gambling property. Arizona has legalized gambling in areas that are run by Indian tribes, but Scottsdale does not have any Indian land. So if you're going to have a hotel in Scottsdale, it cannot have gambling by Arizona law. So they opened a Caesars Republic there. This was not well publicized outside of Arizona. In fact, I had not heard of it until recently. The Caesars Republic brand was, in fact, pretty quietly rolled out. Even someone knowledgeable about Caesars like myself had not heard of it until fairly recently. And I bet most of you have not heard of Caesars Republic until now. But that's what it was. And Caesars Republic Scottsdale opened in March 2024. It has okay-ish reviews. Not great. But anyway, this is not about the Scottsdale property. Some people started mentioning on Facebook that they saw something weird on the Caesars app, that when they went to go look at properties to stay in Lake Tahoe, that Harvey's was no longer listed as Harvey's. Remember, there were two Caesars properties in Tahoe. That was Harrah's and Harvey's. Well, Harvey's was now listed as Caesars Republic Lake Tahoe Hotel and Casino, formerly Harvey's. That's seriously what it says, that big mouthful. Caesars Republic Lake Tahoe Hotel and Casino, formerly Harvey's. That was on the Caesars app, but no further explanation. That's just there in late April. And people are saying, well, what the hell does this mean? What is this? So some people chimed in, okay, well, hold on a second. There is a Caesars Republic in Scottsdale, but it has no gambling. And maybe the app's just messed up. Maybe they're trying to post the Scottsdale property and they got confused. So people thought it might be a glitch. Now, I didn't think it was a glitch, but I thought this was weird because obviously Harvey's, which I knew was in the process of being renovated, I did not think that Harvey's would become a non-gambling property. That wouldn't make any sense. So regardless of what they were going to do with the renovation, I couldn't see them just converting it to a non-gaming property. That would be a complete waste of the property that has an existing gaming license, and the gaming does make money there. So why would they throw that away? So I said, there's no way this could be a Caesars Republic, because Caesars Republic is supposed to be the non-gaming brand of Caesars they just started. Well, I was wrong. The thing I neglected to think about is that you really can't assume anything with Caesars. Caesars has no consistency. So just because Caesars Republic has a non-gaming property originally, and even if that was originally the plan to do with that brand, that doesn't mean that it's going to stay that way. Because Caesar just does strange things. And I should know this by now. And I thought it was possible. But between being in Arizona and having limited time, and also not wanting to post about all this, and just based upon it being on an app, and nowhere else, I searched on the web, I found no other stories, nothing related at all to Caesars Republic Lake Tahoe. I thought, okay, so maybe this is some mistake. Like, there's got to be something wrong here, because Caesars Republic doesn't even make sense for Harvey's. So I didn't say anything. Well, I should have. I could have been the first one reporting it, because yes, Harvey's is going to become a Caesars Republic. So Harvey's really will be called Caesars Republic Lake Tahoe Hotel and Casino. The official rebranding will take place on July 1st, 2025, but it has now been formally announced, though still kind of quietly. That's why you probably haven't heard about it. Caesars is spending $160 million on the remodel of Harvey's. They've generally gone into austerity mode regarding their existing properties. They really have spent very little on renovation in the last few years because they're in debt, and they just feel like this is not the time to be doing that. But Harvey's is the one exception. So a $160 million remodel has been ongoing. I did not know about the rebrand, but yes, it's going to be Caesars Republic Lake Tahoe Hotel and Casino, and no longer Harvey's. When Caesars Republic originally opened in Scottsdale, the description of that brand on the website claimed, quote, "Every amenity is more than an offering, it's a statement. From rooftop lounges with skyline views to immersive wellness spaces and bold culinary experiences, everything has been thoughtfully designed to defy expectations." That's not very tough at Caesars, but nevertheless, defy expectations. It says, "Forget predictable. This is where luxury meets edge, where the local scene is always at your fingertips, and where even downtime feels like an upgrade." This sounds like a marketing person on steroids. Sometimes you can just like overmarket. This is a good example of it. Like, everything doesn't have to sound like you're in heaven, where the local scene is always at your fingertips and even downtime feels like an upgrade. What? What does that even mean? This is where luxury meets edge. Another one. Like, come on. You don't have to overdo it. There's such a thing as understated elegance. So yeah, they're just dropping the whole thing about Caesars Republic only being non-gaming, and I guess it's now a combination of gaming and non-gaming. People thought on Facebook that's a very weird brand name, and I agree, Caesars Republic. It really does sound like it's some kind of country, some kind of third world country. But I've gotten past the point where I try to figure out what Caesars is trying to do. Now, what about Harvey's? What's the history of Harvey's? How far does it go back? I bet you don't know how far it goes back, and I bet it is a lot further back than you would guess. You would probably guess maybe 1970. I bet that is the ballpark of what you'd guess, right? I bet I just read your mind, unless you already know the answer. Well, actually, Harvey's goes all the way back to 1944, and it was opened by a guy named Harvey. His name was Harvey Gross. He was at the time 39 years old. Obviously not alive anymore. If he was 39 back in 1944, that would make him 120 today, which is longer than any man has ever lived on this earth, and probably longer than any woman. There's one woman said to have lived to 122, but I believe it's a fraud. So I believe no human has ever made it to 120. Harvey Gross definitely didn't. He was 39 in 1944. 19 years later, in 1963, Harvey's was converted to an 11-story high-rise, so a much bigger place than originally was opened in 1944. And that was actually the first high-rise hotel in Tahoe, this 11-story high-rise. Now, you may think about Harvey's and go, wait a minute, it's a lot taller than 11 stories. Well, yes, it is. That came later. But something happened in between. In August 1980, there was a guy named John Bridges who was a degenerate and had chunked off a lot of money in Lake Tahoe. I don't know how much of it was at Harvey's, but that was one of them. But he chunked off over
$1 million
at various Lake Tahoe casinos. And he was very angry about it. He should have been angry at himself, but he was angry at the casinos. I'm not exactly sure what the reasoning was. I don't think he believed he was cheated, but he was just very angry that he had lost over $1 million at Tahoe casinos, which, of course, in 1980 was worth a lot more than $1 million today. And he came up with a plan. He knew how to make bombs, and he figured that he would plant bombs in Harvey's, tell them, so this way he's not killing anyone. He's not going to detonate the bombs yet. He's going to plant the bombs, and that he was going to either detonate them by remote control or give them enough time to defuse them, whatever, but he placed bombs in there, and then said he wants $3 million or he's going to blow up Harvey's. They did not end up paying him the $3 million, and the bomb detonated. It caused massive damage. Nobody got hurt because everybody was cleared out by that point, but it caused massive damage. He was found and arrested. He was sentenced to life in prison. He lasted 16 years in prison and died there, I think of cancer or something. I don't know how old he was. So that was in 1980, so Harvey really did get bombed. The guy made bomb threats and said, give me $3 million or I'm going to blow it up. He didn't get the $3 million. He blew it up and took a while to repair. Didn't blow it to the ground, but blew a big hole in it. So they had to repair that. I'm not sure how long that took. 6 years later, in 1986, they put up a second tower, an 18-story tower. So the Harvey's you know today has two towers, an 11-story tower and an 18-story tower, and those were the two I just talked about. In 1999, Harvey's was sold. Now, Harvey himself was not alive anymore by 1999, but his family still owned it. But they sold most of their interest to a company called Colony Capital in 1999, who then turned it over and resold it, and was probably a flip, to Harrah's 2 years later for $625 million. Harrah's is now Caesars. In 2005, Harrah's and Caesars merged and took on the Caesars name. And similarly, the more recent merge with Eldorado took on the Caesars name as well. So there's been two merges in the last 20 years with Harrah's and another company where every time the Caesars name was taken. After Harrah's purchased Harvey's, they built a tunnel that made it easier to traverse between Harvey's and Harrah's without having to cross the street. Those two properties are connected in that way. So this way, if you enter one, you can get to the other without ever going outside. So they've decided that Harvey's is no longer. The tunnel will remain, but it will now be Caesars Republic on the other end. If you remember, we talked about Vanderpump on the last show and how the Cromwell in Vegas was going to become the Vanderpump Hotel. And I did mention that there's a restaurant called Wolf by Vanderpump in Harvey's, and that is going to remain. So that's not going to go anywhere. Other features of Harvey's that are well-liked are going to stay. I'm not sure about that steakhouse on top. There's a steakhouse on the top floor that a lot of people like. I was there once. It was fine. I didn't think it was anything special. I'm not sure if that's going to remain, but I know for sure the Vanderpump place, which didn't open too long ago, that's going to stay. They're going to do a major redesign of the casino floor, which they need. It's looking kind of tired and old. The steakhouse called the Sage Room. I'm still not sure if that's going to be kept. But as I said, the Vanderpump will stay there. Harvey's does have a nice view of the Lake Tahoe area, including the lake itself, as does Harrah's. Someone on Vegas Casino Talk, the sister site to Poker Fraud Alert, also owned by me, a person named DGen Ben, said that Caesars is holding most of their properties together with chewing gum and masking tape. He wrote, one of the only value adds you can find at Caesars properties is if your own home needs repairs, no matter how badly, once you walk into 99% of Caesars properties, your own home will feel like a palace, and you'll feel completely confident in putting off any expensive repairs for years and years to come. Yeah, that's true. I hate to say it, but that's true. I think he's right. I have gone to Caesars properties before, and then I've come back home, and I'm like, oh, yeah, we still need to fix these few things. But, hey, at least my sink still runs properly. At least my toilet still runs properly. Like, I start looking at basic things that weren't working in the Caesars room, and I go, well, at least this all works here. The guy has a point. Someone else on Vegas Casino Talk named M-Dog asked, does this mean that Harrah's Tahoe is going to be left to rot because Harvey's is going to become the much better property? Answer is probably yes. But according to the Tahoe Daily Tribune, they are going to do some work on Harrah's as well, though it doesn't look like as much. The article says, across the street, Harrah's Lake Tahoe, which is connected to Caesars Republic Lake Tahoe via an underground connector, is also undergoing improvements, including renovating the resort's iconic Summit Suites. So I guess they're going to make the suites a little bit nicer. I've stayed in the suites in Harrah's. They're okay. You can tell they're kind of old-looking. You kind of feel like you're back in the 80s. Here's a piece of trivia you may not know about Harrah's, that Bill Harrah had a weird obsession. Now, this didn't make it into the Vegas property, but he had a weird obsession that he loved having 2 bathrooms in standard hotel rooms, which, by the way, I think is great. I think that's a huge improvement to have. Because there's this weird assumption that you only need 1 bathroom in a hotel room. But that's not really true. Because most of the time, when people go to a place like Lake Tahoe or Las Vegas, they're going with somebody. They're going with their wife or their husband, their girlfriend, their boyfriend, whatever. Sometimes even just 2 friends. And when one person's in the bathroom, you usually have to wait, and then the other person comes in. And it can even be awkward to do 2 separate things at once there. Like if you got to go take a dump in the bathroom, do you really want someone showering at the same time you're taking a dump there? Like it's kind of weird, Like you can, but usually people just kind of stay out and wait till the other person's done. And you always think like, wow, it'd be nice if I had 2 bathrooms to where we could each do our own thing. So Bill Harrah must have noticed this at some point. And so when he built Harrah's Lake Tahoe, he made sure there were 2 bathrooms in each room. So seriously, every single room in Harrah's Lake Tahoe has 2 bathrooms, and it's very nice. The renovations at Harvey's will continue all the way through mid-2026, but they're going to pause during the summer for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. You might say, well, maybe that's the high season. Well, I don't know about that, because Tahoe has a very big winter season as well. People flock to Tahoe for the winter so they can ski, and for the summer to do summer activities. The deader seasons in Tahoe are times like now, the late spring, and also the early fall. That's the deadest time, like October, November. The reason is because it's still kind of cool at this time of year, so it's a little bit too cool for summery activities, and yet there is no snow or not much snow, and usually the ski resorts are closed by now. And in October, they're not open yet. early November. They're usually not open yet. So people don't want to go to Tahoe when it's kind of cool or cold, and yet there's no snow to enjoy. They want to either do snow activities or summer activities. So why they would pause this during the summer, I don't know. It's weird. Give you an example of the weather at Tahoe. Later today, the high is going to be 57 degrees, low 33. Now, if it gets like a warm spell, it can be nice in May. Like, for example, it's going to warm up in the western U.S. at the end of the week. So on Friday, it's forecasted to be 75 high, 44 low, which is pretty nice. But most days in May are not like that. And then back a week from today, it's back to high 55, low 34. Not bitter cold by any means, but not where you really want to go to relax and do summery type activities. Like you don't want to go somewhere for summery activities if it's 55 degrees high. If it's going to be cold, you'd like there to be snow. So that's why this is kind of the dead time there. I used to laugh at some of the best offers I'd get for Harrah's Lake Tahoe would be for May, October, November. I'm like, yeah, sure, they're giving me good offers because nobody wants to go then. I want to see this offer for the first week of January or the middle of July, but they don't send it to me for that. I see Garrett in the chat. Hello to Garrett. He said, LOL, using GTO Wizard in the background as a site pro. Yeah, it's amazing that they would actually, two different pros that stupidly take pictures of their screen with that up there. That's just plain stupid. You can text me, by the way, 775-372-8355 if you'd like. Let's see, should we do one more topic? Maybe we should do one more topic. Then we'll have another show pretty soon to cover the rest, which I haven't gotten to. Here's a good one. Let's do a Vegas crime story. Kind of doing a little of everything. We had a story about Caesars Republic, ACR story, 2 sports betting stories. So let's do a Vegas story now. Have you heard of Piero's? Piero, apostrophe S. Piero's. Have you heard of them? You probably have if you've paid attention at all to Vegas or if you live in Vegas especially. Piero's is a well-known, long-standing, high-end Italian restaurant, and it's on the corner of Paradise and Convention Center Drive, and it's fairly close to the Westgate, formerly the Las Vegas Hilton. So if you cross the street from the Westgate, you're very, very close to Piero's. It originally opened in 1982 near downtown on Caron Avenue. It was not founded by an Italian. It was founded by presumably a Jew named Freddie Glusman, Glusman. And 5 years later, in 1987, Freddie moved it to its current location on Convention Center and Paradise. And he took over the space which housed a different Italian restaurant called Via d'Este. Now, Via d'Este had a mob history at the time. A lot of mobsters hung out there, including Tony the Ant Spilotro and others. But this was not Via d'Este, it's just the same location that Piero's took over in 1987. Possibly because of its location, the movie Casino, which was about mob activity in Vegas in the 80s, including a character that was supposed to be very similar to Tony the Ant. The movie Casino featured Piero's. Now, at the time of the original Piero's founding in 1982, Freddie Glusman's son, Evan, was just 3 years old. So obviously he had nothing to do with the founding, the son, being a toddler at the time. But of course, 1982 was a long time ago. Even I was a boy in 1982, though I was older than 3. Today, Evan Glusman is 46. And he's in a whole heap of trouble having to do with Piero's. So Freddie Glusman is still alive. Quite old, but he's still alive. I don't know how much he is involved with the active management of Piero's at this point. But Evan definitely was. Evan was the operating manager of Piero's. And according to TV station KLAS, which is Channel 8 in Las Vegas, Evan took out a $1.5 million loan against Piero's in September 2024, claiming to be the owner of the restaurant when he really was not and had no authority to take out such a loan. In addition, Evan allegedly did not tell his dad, the actual owner, about the loan and just took the loan out and I guess hoped it wouldn't be found out. Well, in reality, Piero's was still wholly owned by Evan's father, Freddie. Evan had no ownership. He had no authority to take a loan, as I said. When Freddie found out about this loan several months later, in mid-April 2025, he was furious. And he fired Evan. He fired his own son. But it got worse from there. So Evan did not take the firing well. And he texted a Piero's manager, "I hope you realize I'm drinking and I'm going home to get a gun and fucking kill them in the middle of Piero's," he wrote. I'm not sure who them is. Maybe including his dad. I don't know. But he was going to kill some people apparently in the middle of Piero's because he was drinking and going home to get a gun, so he claimed. Now, fortunately, he did not do this. And the manager called the police. And I think may have told Evan that he called the police. But whatever it was, Evan knew the police had been called. He actually called into the restaurant and spoke with officers. It's not clear what was said between them. The following day, a SWAT team came to Evan's home and arrested him. He did not resist arrest. He was charged with harassment and making terrorist threats. He was not charged with anything related to the $1.5 million loan, but that's likely to occur as well at some point. He is out of jail at the moment. He only had to post a $20,000 bond and is now out with an ankle monitor, which surprises me given he was making death threats. Court documents regarding the loan, I think, may be related to a civil case that has to do with it. The court documents say Evan Glusman provided outdated, inaccurate, and or altered trust documents to the financial institution in support of the loan application, thereby misrepresenting his legal authority over the trust and the property. So probably what happened here is he presented documents to the bank showing that he was trustee and that the trust owned Piero's, and therefore as the trustee, he had authorization to take a loan against Piero's, and then in reality that was not true. There probably was a trust that was naming him as the beneficiary of Piero's, but he probably has nothing yet because his dad is still alive. I have never been to Piero's. I've been going to Vegas in some form or another since the 1970s, and fairly often. Of course, the 70s I wasn't taking myself there. My parents were going. I was a little boy. I've lived in Vegas for 8 years, as most of you know. I always meant to go to Piero's, but I just never got around to it. Current reviews of Piero's are mostly good. There are some complaints about the service. There's some people who also complained about reservations that occasionally are not honored, that they make a reservation and they get there and the host says, "What? Well, we don't have your reservation, sorry." And there's even a few complaints about the parking lot sometimes being full because they rent it out to third parties for events nearby, and then there's not enough for the restaurant customers to park at. But those are the type of complaints. There are not many complaints about the food. People do seem to like the food there. The complaints seem to be mostly about non-food issues, and overall the reviews are fairly good. I found a blog from 2010 featuring lots of pictures of a much younger and happier-looking Evan Glusman. Also includes pictures of his wife. Evan Glusman is still with his wife, from what I can tell, and I believe she works in real estate. But they are still together. I don't know if she'll stay together after this, but at least before this all occurred, it seemed like they're still together. He already looked a little bit older than his age in 2010. He was 31 at the time. He looked a little bit older than that, maybe like 35. The picture I see of him at the courthouse, he looks a good deal older than 46. He looks like he's in his 50s, but it could be just because it's not a good moment for him. Obviously, when you've spent the night in jail and you're now walking into court over serious charges and your father's fired you and maybe cutting you out of the will, there's a lot to be upset about. So I can understand how he's not looking his best there, to say the least. He is all gray, apparently. And I know everybody grays at different rates. Maybe not all gray. It's kind of a dark picture. It's possibly not all gray. He looks mostly gray. By the way, in case you're wondering about me, how gray am I? How gray do you think I am? I'm 53 years old. Do you think I'm all gray, mostly gray, a little bit gray, not gray at all, bald? Which one? I do not dye my hair, by the way. Don't dye my hair, don't dye my beard. So this, whatever color my hair is now, is the natural color. The answer is I am partially gray, but I'm less gray than I am not gray. So I have most of my hair color still. I have some gray on the sides, some gray in the back, some very new gray on the top, which kind of sucks. Just noticed that. Just came that gray on the top. But if you look at me, you don't see a guy with gray hair. You see a guy with dark brown hair with some gray in it. That's what I look like today. And my beard lasted a long time before getting gray at all. It took till my 50th birthday approximately for any gray to show up in my beard. You can look at pictures of me playing the World Series in my late 40s, and you can see that I was not gray yet in my beard. Had a little gray in my hair, but my beard was not gray at all yet, which is unusual because most guys have gray facial hair, at least somewhat, starting from mid-40s or beforehand. Some people get in their 30s. But I got it all the way to 50 before it happened, and the last year it's increased a lot. I still have more brown than gray in my beard, but there's definitely a lot more gray now than there was even 1 year ago in my beard. Evan Glusman has a lot more gray than I do, even though he's 7 years younger. A person named The Boz, who's on both Vegas Casino Talk and Poker Fraud Alert, posted about Piero's food was decent, but nothing I couldn't get in any U.S. city. There's the question as to why Evan did this. So why would he take a $1.5 million loan behind his dad's back against Piero's? Yeah, he's not just doing this for fun. So why did he do it? Well, he obviously had the need for the money in some way. The question is, what is that need? Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Gambling, right? He lives in Vegas, so maybe he developed a gambling problem, and that's very possible. But keep in mind, he's been in Vegas his entire life. Remember, his dad started Piero's when he was 3. So presumably he didn't leave and go elsewhere, which it doesn't appear because in 2010 he was still in Vegas. So I think he's been in Vegas his entire life. I think it would be uncommon for someone who's been in Vegas their entire life and resisted having a gambling problem to just suddenly develop one in their mid-40s. Usually if people are going to develop a gambling problem that late in life, it's because they get introduced to gambling late in life, or they start going to a place that has gambling a lot late in life. But you're usually not going to grow up in Vegas and then just suddenly snap and have a gambling issue in your mid-40s when prior to that you did not have one. However, it is possible that he's had one his whole life and his dad was just helping him. Every time he got into a bind, maybe his dad was giving him money and got him out of it. I don't know. It also could have nothing to do with gambling. The need for the money could have something to do with drugs. It could have something to do with just lavish spending. He may be someone who enjoyed being part of the high roller Vegas social scene. In fact, I even got a glimpse of that in that 2010 blog that his friend put up, where it seemed like they were going around Vegas and partying in different spots. Maybe that's what he was doing. Now, he wasn't single. Remember, he was with his wife for many years. She's still with him. That same woman pictured in 2010 is still with him. So I don't think he was running around Vegas to meet chicks, but it's possible his wife was going with him. It's possible that he just enjoyed being part of the Vegas social scene where a lot of money is spent and just overspent. And he just wasn't being paid enough by his dad to support it and went broke and then got desperate and took a $1.5 million loan. And you would think if he's taking a loan of that size, it's because he needs that much money. So, for example, maybe he took all the money out of his house and had no more equity in his house, and he felt like his back was against the wall. It could have been something like that. But yeah, it also could have been that he accumulated huge gambling debt, and this is how much he needed to get out of it. So maybe we'll find out the reason for this, maybe not. The press is interested in this story because of Piero's history in Las Vegas. But I will say I never pictured the Pieros would be part of this type of story. I'll tell you a little side story, a little bit having to do with Pieros. So there was a situation that occurred at Piero's involving Benny Benin, not Benny Binion, but Benny Benin, who was part of the Binion family. It's a little confusing. But there is the Binion family, and then there's the Benin family, Behnen. And there was a marriage between the Benins and the Binins. So Becky Binion became Becky Benin. And there was a son born named Benny. So Benny Benin, who's sometimes confused as Benny Binion, but is a different person. Benny Benin was a young man at the time, in the 2000s. And he actually attacked Bob Stupak in Piero's over a dispute between the two families. And that made the news. Benny Benin seemed to like to fight. He's kind of a thuggish character, at least back then. He was 23 years old, I believe, when he attacked Bob Stupak, who was no angel, by the way. Bob Stupak probably deserved it. I don't know who was right in the dispute between the Benins and Bob Stupak, but I heard some bad things about Bob Stupak over time. So I didn't exactly feel bad for him. Anyway, remember Dustin Neverwin Wolf? Remember him? One of the founders of Neverwin Poker, which is kind of a predecessor to Poker Fraud Alert in some ways. Well, Neverwin became friends with Benny Benin. And I don't know how he did. I don't know how that friendship occurred, but it did. And they were friends and hung out a lot. Now, I never got to meet Benny Benin. But I was talking to Neverwin one day in the 2000s, and I told Neverwin about a confrontation I had with somebody at the Bellagio, which is another poker player. So it was a confrontation. You know, we had issues with one another, me and another person. I'm not going to say who it is. It's not anyone relevant anymore. And, you know, there was some yelling. There was some stuff that was said. And when I told Neverwin about this and how much I didn't like this particular guy, and again, it's no one relevant today, so don't try to guess who it is. You're not going to be able to. And Neverwin said, okay, well, I can have Benny Benin go there and kick his ass. And he was serious. He was serious about having Benny go there and beat up this guy because I had a problem with him. And I'd never met or spoken to Benny before. But Neverwin was offering this to me, not for money. He wasn't saying you can hire Benny to do this. He's like, Benny will do it. I'll tell him to do it. He'll beat the guy up. I don't know if Benny was supposed to do it himself, or if Benny was going to bring friends over to beat him up. Benny attacked Bob Stupak himself, but Bob Stupak wasn't exactly a tough guy at that point. He was much older and already had injuries from a motorcycle accident. This individual I was having the disputes with at Bellagio would have been a tougher fight than Bob Stupak, but so I don't know what Benny would have done. But I think he would have just gone himself. I think Benny just liked to fight. But I declined it. I wasn't going to send someone down there to beat this guy up that I was having the issue with. We hadn't gotten the issue that far. I mean, like, it was just some unpleasantries there in the Bellagio poker room. Someone I didn't like, but not to the point where I'm going to have some stranger go beat him up. But that was seriously offered to me by Neverwin. And I said, no, let's not do that. But he was serious. I don't know what would have happened if I said yes. Like maybe Benny Benin would have gone down and beaten the guy up for me. I don't know. I thought it was weird that he would do this for me, given that I'd never met him or spoken to him. But maybe he and Neverwin were that close. If Neverwin says, hey, go beat this guy up at the Bellagio, he'd do it. Weird. But Neverwin was dead serious about it. The Benins owned the Horseshoe from the late 90s through 2004, when it had its kind of collapse over there. Becky Benin mismanaged it and ran it to the ground. And that actually had a major impact on the World Series of Poker because Binion's Horseshoe was the owner of the World Series of Poker since it was started there in 1970. And when Harrah's bought Binion's from Becky Benin to basically bail her out of the whole thing, they took ownership of the World Series of Poker, which is the whole reason they bought it, which she didn't realize. She didn't realize she was sitting on a gold mine there. So they bought Binion's from her and then quickly sold it off to a third-party company, and then they kept the World Series of Poker. And they sold it for about the same price they bought it, so they really got the World Series for free. That was a brilliant move, which I've talked about before on the show. Brilliant move by Harrah's/Caesars. And they really ate Becky Benin's lunch on that one because she had the World Series of Poker and didn't know that it had tremendous value. Now, yes, Caesars did a lot to grow the World Series of Poker and increase its value. So they did a lot of good marketing and built it up even bigger. But the truth was it was getting rapidly bigger anyway and was going to get bigger anyway because of the poker boom that was ongoing in 2004. But yeah, very good move. Of course, now they don't own it anymore. They sold it to GG Poker for $500 million. Mickey Krim, an old school gambler who still travels around the country and plays advantage slots, he posts on both Poker Fraud Alert and Vegas Casino Talk, referring to the offer I had regarding Benny Benin. He said, I think he had access to a goon squad. I played poker with him once at the Horseshoe. His mother made him the manager of the Horseshoe, but he wasn't licensed. No way he had the experience to do the job. You had to watch it with the Binions and Benins. They got away with everything. The cops didn't want anything to do with charging or writing them up for anything. Yeah, I can believe that. It's the way Vegas was. He did get arrested for the attack on Bob Stupak, but I don't know what came of that. I don't know if he ever was prosecuted fully for it. All I know at the time is he was perfectly happy to get into fights with people. Haven't heard what he's doing recently, though. Like, he's not a young guy anymore. He's younger than me, but he's not a young guy now. So he's probably, I'm guessing, 43 now or so. Somewhere in that range. So I don't know what Benny Benin is doing now. Be kind of interested to know. All right, well, I'm pretty much done here. And see, this can make you feel better that if we get in a dispute, if we yell at each other in the poker room, even if I am offered to have someone beat you up, I will say, no, don't do it. It's okay. Let's just let it go. And, you know, I could have said yes to it and just, like, not attributed it to myself. Like, I could have just had Benny not say anything. Benny didn't have to say, this is for Todd. You know, he could have just done it to the guy, and I could have just had the satisfaction, but I didn't want that done. I was sitting there thinking how weird this is, though. I'm like I'm sitting here living in Vegas, and I'm actually getting offered by a third party for someone associated with the Binion family to go beat up somebody in a poker room who had an issue with me. Like, how did I get here? All right, that's all for now. I could do more, but I think it's better that I stop right at this point here. Am I going to address why I haven't been on in a week? Wait a minute, a week? A month? See, I'm all confused here. Am I going to address why I haven't been on in a month? No. I just don't feel like addressing it. Like, it's just, the show has just not gone that often this year. That's the answer. Part of it was the trip, though. I was actually going to go somewhere else, not Arizona, and then I changed it at the last minute, so that took some additional time, too. But I ended up going to Arizona, to some places I've never been to before. I went to Tucson, that I'd never been to. I went to Sedona, that I've never been to. And I went to, like, central eastern Arizona, which I hadn't been to before. And I drove on the rim of this big canyon over there that most people don't know exists. I'm not talking about the Grand Canyon. You all know about the Grand Canyon, but there's a separate canyon in Arizona that's pretty impressive and pretty deep. And It's a dirt road most of the way, and it doesn't have guardrails on it. So a little bit scary, but I don't know, I'm used to driving on scary roads, so it didn't really worry me. But it's called the Mogollon Rim. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. But you're really driving along the rim of a canyon. And most people don't go there. And I was in Phoenix at the end. I even took a picture in front of the sign that was at the beginning of the TV show Alice, because that was based on a real diner over there. Anyway, I'll do more of this show in a few days or so. Shalom.